Chapter 129. In the blink of an eye, the three ferocious kings had gathered together. In the face of danger, they always had a tacit understanding. Chi-Yu did not include the king of the ferocious beasts and the powerful beasts outside when he used the infinite changes of the four stars boundary technique. This was because he knew very well that although the infinite changes of the four stars boundary technique was powerful, it also depended on the user's own energy. If the enemy's energy was much stronger than his own, then the infinite changes of the four stars boundary technique could only last for a very limited amount of time. Therefore, what the king of the ferocious beasts could see now was a dark red light. Chi-Yu even controlled the infinite changes of the four stars boundary technique, so that he could see everything inside from the outside, so that he would not impulsively lead the other beasts into the infinite changes of the four stars boundary technique. This way, he would be able to buy more time. Of course, in this strange domain, what Chi-Yu wanted the fifth ferocious beast and the other beasts to see was what he wanted them to see. Some things that he could not let them see they would definitely not be able to see. When everything around them was completely shrouded by the dark red light, Chi-Yu's voice suddenly sounded in Shirue's mind. Leader Shirue, perhaps you can't see it now, but I belong to the side of the divine beasts. I don't have much time to explain anything to you. I will now send you out in the direction of the headquarters of the Earth race. No matter what, after you leave this place, you must immediately return to the headquarters. If your great shaman is really as powerful as you say, then please help us. Otherwise, it will be the end of our fate, and this will be the last thing I can do for you. Shirue did not know how to respond to Chi-Yu's words, because Chi-Yu's voice had directly appeared in his mind. Everything that had happened previously had brought him too much shock. Although he also knew that Chi-Yu was very powerful, he could never have imagined that Chi-Yu had actually reached such a level of strength. Despite facing so many ferocious beasts, he was still able to face them without retreating. Furthermore, he had not fallen into a disadvantageous position even now. Shirue's mind was in a mess, but at the same time, he could feel the changes in his surroundings. His body felt light, and everything around him seemed to revolve around him, including Tyrannical Song and his black tiger. In an instant, all of them were sucked into this huge whirlpool. Then, everything around them suddenly disappeared. Their minds went blank for a moment. Chi-Yu used his thundercloud force to solve the problem of having to worry about the future as soon as the 1,000 opportunities ever-changing Jade Pearl Realm technique was sent to the branch office. Ever since he recovered the thundercloud force, he had never stopped exploring the 1,000 changes realm of the Jade Sarcasm technique. After the experience of dealing with the green phosphorus splitting tree lizard, Chi-Yu knew that the 1,000 opportunities ever-changing Jade Pearl Realm technique was his best insurance when he encountered a powerful enemy. As a result, whenever he cultivated the cloud force in his body, he would split out a portion of his attention to study the extremely complicated Qilin domain that had existed since the beginning of time. He had already figured out some of the changes within. When Ting's father had once told him, if he encountered a powerful enemy, even if he couldn't defeat them with force, he could still escape by relying on the 1,000 opportunities ever-changing Jade Pearl Realm technique. Chi-Yu sent Shirue and the others away as a demonstration of this ability. In the 1,000 opportunities ever-changing Jade Pearl Realm technique, this was known as directional transmission. However, this directional transmission was only useful against enemies in the 1,000 opportunities ever-changing Jade Pearl Realm technique, or against people who weren't in charge of the formation. In the original design of Wen Ting's father, when the enemy was too powerful, this directional transmission talisman would send the enemy away in an instant, giving him more time to escape. The world itself was balanced, and any ability had its limit. The directional transmission talisman was the same. Therefore, Chi-Yu didn't try to send the three fierce kings away. After all, they were too powerful, and even if he successfully sent them away, he couldn't send them too far away. Moreover, it would consume a lot of energy for Chi-Yu, and there were so many ferocious beasts and fierce beast kings out there. Initially, he wanted to send Wen-Ting and Snow Girl away, but Wen-Ting and Wen-Ting were telepathically connected, and this trap was created by Wen-Ting's father. It was just that Wen-Ting herself didn't agree, so there was nothing Chi-Yu could do about it. As for Snow Girl, it was even simpler. When Chi-Yu had just used the 1,000 opportunities ever-changing Jade Pearl Realm technique, Snow Girl's body had already changed. In the face of so many enemies, Snow Girl was very clear that her strength was absolutely not enough, and it was impossible for her to contend against so many enemies. If she joined the battle, it would only cause trouble for Chi-Yu and Wen-Ting. Therefore, when Chi-Yu's 1,000 opportunities ever-changing Jade Pearl Realm technique couldn't be used, she immediately condensed all her energy, and at the same time, activated an ability that Chi-Yu and Wen-Ting had never seen or even heard of. That was shape-shifting. The so-called shape-shifting was a special ability that could instantly change one's form, but it didn't change one's energy. Under certain circumstances, it had a miraculous effect, and was an ability that only people with special abilities like Snow Girl could have. Even if Chi-Yu had reached the level of Cloudless, he still wouldn't be able to do it. At this time, Snow Girl's body had completely disappeared, and in the palm of Chi-Yu's left hand, there was an additional needle. It was 8 inches long, thick in the middle, and extremely sharp at both ends. It was filled with the highly condensed ice energy of Snow Girl. In a sense, such an ice needle was almost indestructible. Chi-Yu didn't know that at this time, Snow Girl had already become his most powerful weapon. Even Chi-Yu didn't know how much power the ice needle formed from Snow Girl's shape-shifting could actually exert. Sending Shirwei and the others away did not consume too much of Chi-Yu's energy. After all, it was impossible for Shirwei and the others to resist being sent away by Chi-Yu. In their own situation, there would not be a conflict of energy between them. At this time, not only did Chi-Yu send them away, but he also recalled the deep-sea nether snake back into his body. The deep-sea nether snake's body was too big, and in the face of so many strong enemies, Chi-Yu didn't want its body to become a target. Therefore, there were only 5 people in the 1,000 Changes Xuanji Realm technique, Chi-Yu, Wen-Ting, and the 3 shaving backrest. They were vigilantly watching the 3 fierce kings. With a smile, Chi-Yu and Wen-Ting appeared out of thin air 100 meters away from the 3 fierce kings. "How is it? What do you think of my realm?" Chi-Yu looked mockingly at the 3 fierce kings. At the very least, these 3 fellows had yet to take any action. Their intelligence was naturally incomparable to the splitting tree lizard from back then. Faced with this sudden change, in the face of the sudden change, they immediately responded by remaining unchanged and waited quietly. This was the second time that Chi-Yu had truly used the 1,000 Changes Xuanji Realm technique. This time, his enemies were much stronger than the first time. However, Chi-Yu was also stronger than before. More importantly, his understanding of the 1,000 Changes Xuanji Realm technique was far from what it was back then. If Chi-Yu had this ability back then, how could he have been sent to this era by the reincarnation fruit that was triggered by the cracking tree lucid? The great rock wisdom king snorted coldly. "Do you think that such a realm can control us?" Chi-Yu smiled and said, "I have never thought that way. However, I really want to talk to the 3 of you." The Chaos King said in a shrill voice, "Talk? What is there to talk about? Mo Fei, are you already at the end of your rope?" Chi-Yu said without batting an eyelid, "We haven't even made a move. What do you mean by, at the end of my rope? I think there is nothing wrong with us having an exchange with the 3 powerful fierce beasts. In my realm, you don't need to worry at all. At least, I haven't attacked you yet. This is enough to show my sincerity." The deep-sea Hades Dragon King said in a low voice, "What do I want to talk about?" Chi-Yu smiled indifferently. "It's very simple. It's what I said earlier. Could it be that, with your strength, you're willing to submit to someone else? If you are willing, I can help you regain the power and status that you deserve. I wonder if the three kings have this intention? The great Rock Wisdom King snorted coldly and said, You don't need to sow discord here. This is useless to us. Are you trying to incite us fierce beasts to kill each other to weaken our strength? Dream on. Our loyalty to the king is absolute. Chi-Jo snorted disdainfully and said, Then, I'll give you 2 words. Stupid. The great Rock Wisdom King said angrily, What did you say? Chi-Yu smiled indifferently and said, There is one thing I can tell you first. You can rest assured. In my realm, no sound can be transmitted. Your king can't hear it at all. Even if you are loyal to him, will he really believe you? The Chaos King said, Why not? We are the most loyal subordinates of the king. Chi-Jo chuckled and said, I'm afraid even you can't fool yourself with this. If he really believed you, he wouldn't have sent you out to die. Why didn't he come to fight me himself? Why did he send you out instead? Chi-Jo's words stumped the 3 ferocious kings. Just as Chi-Yu expected, the 3 ferocious kings' respect for the ferocious beast king wasn't that sincere. Looking at each other, the deep-sea nether dragon king said, No matter what, this is an internal matter of us ferocious beasts. It's impossible for you to sow discord between us. Moreover, there are dozens of ferocious beast experts outside. Do you think you can leave this place just because you can persuade the 3 of us? Dream on. Chi-Yu smiled indifferently and said, I never expect anything. Since you are so stubborn, then let's see who's the real deal. However, many of the ferocious beasts outside are also your subordinate. I'm afraid they will listen to the ferocious beast king's commands completely. Let me remind you one last time. If the ferocious beast king suddenly dies, what do you think the other ferocious beasts will do? Ha 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 ha. Laughing heartily, Chi-Yu brought Wen-Ting and disappeared before the 3 ferocious kings once again. The 3 ferocious kings didn't move. In their hearts, they were carefully considering Chi-Yu's words. Yes, if the ferocious beast king suddenly died, then what would happen to everything? Other than the ferocious beast king, including the 3 of them, the strength of the other experts in the ferocious beast world was about the same. It was hard to say who would become the new ferocious beast king. However, was it really that simple? No one knew better than them just how powerful the ferocious beast king was. Just as they were thinking, Chi-Yu and Wen-Ting appeared once again. This time, they appeared in a different direction. Just as the 3 ferocious kings thought that Chi-Yu was going to say something, they suddenly saw that Chi-Yu's body had changed. The fiery red Kirin armor appeared out of nowhere and covered his original Kirin armor. Just as the 3 ferocious kings were shocked, Chi-Yu's attack had already appeared. Fiery hell! The light in Chi-Yu's eyes became unusually cold. An enormous fire thundercloud force floated out and instantly, the entire 4 stars realm technique was completely covered in raging flames. In an instant, all the 3 ferocious kings could see was a sea of raging flames. Of course, this was not the true Kirin true fire. It was just that under the amplification of the 4 stars realm technique and the effects of the 4 stars realm technique, the 3 ferocious kings could see that the flames had completely filled the entire space. Chi-Yu had chosen to use the fire thundercloud force after careful consideration. The Chaos King's attribute was very special and he did not know what could restrain it. The Rock King's attribute was unexpectedly different from that of the winged rock eagle. Judging from his weapon, it was actually leaning towards the attributes of metal and ice. Needless to say, the deep-sea abyssal dragon king was definitely of the water attribute. Under such special circumstances, using the fire thundercloud force was naturally the best method. The sudden appearance of a large amount of Kirin true fire immediately made the 3 ferocious kings nervous. Gray mist erupted from the Chaos King's body and enveloped his body. The Rock King swung the long blade in his hand and the greenish-blue blade naturally formed a barrier under the illumination of the golden light, protecting his body. The deep-sea abyssal dragon king's action was even simpler. He opened his mouth, and a wave of purple water ripples directly isolated the Kirin true fire. For a moment, the three ferocious kings each displayed their own abilities and defended against the attack of the fiery hell. Sensing the changes in the energy of the three ferocious kings, Chi Yu could not help but be secretly shocked. The ability of the Kirin true fire had been enhanced to its limit under the amplification of Kirin red. Moreover, he had already reached the 6-cloud level and had undergone the second stage of transformation. Even with so many enhancements, the Kirin true fire was still unable to pose any threat to the three ferocious kings. This showed how powerful they were. Amidst the flashes of light, Chi Yu shouted in a low voice, "Fire change." The Kirin true fire instantly changed during the condensation. At this moment, his highly condensed thundercloud force immediately displayed its unique offensive power. Although the overall energy was not as strong as the three ferocious kings, it was similar to the first time he fought with Snow Girl. Because of the excessive condensation of the fire thundercloud force, when it collided with the opponent's attack, the instantaneous explosive power made up for the lack of offensive power. At the same time, the three ferocious kings felt the crazy bombardment of the Kirin true fire from the front. In the midst of the explosion, it seemed as if it was going to completely engulf their bodies. They hurriedly concentrated their defense in front of their bodies. At this moment, they still could not understand the mystery of the 1,000 changes of the 4 stars realm technique. Therefore, it was better for them to protect their bodies first. However, when they mainly concentrated their defense in front of their chest, suddenly, the three ferocious kings were shocked to find that the defense next to them had disappeared. Their back-to-back defense was suddenly broken. At the same time, they saw that the other 2 ferocious kings were a few hundred meters away from them. At this moment, the attack of the Kirin true fire that appeared in front of them suddenly changed to their back. In an instant, a tyrannical attack was launched from their back. 3 angry roars sounded almost at the same time. Although the 3 ferocious kings were powerful, under the circumstances where they used the wrong strength and were heavily bombarded by Chi Yu's concentrated Kirin true fire, it was definitely not a good feeling. Almost at the same time, they let out a muffled groan. The energy of the 3 ferocious kings' defense was instantly raised to the limit. Although they did not really suffer any real damage, they broke out in a cold sweat. They were extremely puzzled. Why did the 3 of them suddenly separate from each other when they were originally together? They could not help but suspect the other 2 ferocious kings. The 3 ferocious kings had always been scheming against each other. Under such circumstances, they all suspected that the other 2 ferocious kings wanted to take the opportunity to destroy them. For a moment, their original alliance was immediately broken. Under the effect of selfishness, they immediately turned into individual battles and did not return to the same group. In fact, this was all caused by Chi Yu. Indeed, the defensive power of the 3 ferocious kings, who had their backs against each other in a triangular formation, was very difficult to break. Not to mention Chi Yu, even a Kirin at full strength would find it difficult to break through. However, within the 1,000 changes of the 4 stars domain technique, many impossible things could become possible. When Chi Yu launched his attack, he controlled his 1,000 changes of the 4 stars domain technique to suddenly enlarge the tiny space between the 3 ferocious kings, and immediately widen the distance between the 3 ferocious kings. Then, he forcibly controlled his Kirin true fire to teleport and launched an attack from the back of the 3 ferocious kings. On the surface, it seemed that Chi Yu had obtained an absolute advantage. However, deep down, he was very clear that the 3 ferocious kings were too powerful. Even if they did not have the ability to fight back and allowed him to attack freely, it would still be a very difficult task to catch up to them. In the face of absolute power, techniques might be able to gain some advantages, but it was extremely difficult to achieve the final victory. The 1,000 changes of the 4 stars domain technique was indeed amazing, but at the same time, it consumed an extremely large amount of thundercloud force, especially when it was trapping 3 super ferocious beasts of this level. Qiyu could clearly feel that his thundercloud force of the 6 clouds realm was also rapidly depleting, and even he did not know how long he could last. If the 3 enemies were all about the same strength as Qiyu, then he could still use the 1,000 changes of the 4 stars domain technique to separate and defeat them one by one. However, the absolute strength of the 3 ferocious kings was too strong. With more than 20,000 years of cultivation, it was not so easy to deal with them. Idiots, what are the 3 of you doing? Join forces and destroy this domain of his first. The voice of the ferocious beast king was suddenly transmitted into the 1,000 changes of the 4 stars domain technique without warning, causing the 3 ferocious kings to be shocked at the same time. Qiyu was even more shocked. During his battle with the 3 ferocious kings, he had been using the 1,000 changes of the 4 stars domain technique to create illusions for the ferocious beast king outside. However, he did not expect the ferocious beast king's mental strength to be strong enough to transmit his voice into his domain. This time, Qiyu felt a strong sense of danger. At this critical juncture, Qiyu's mind was completely clear and the thundercloud force in his body was operating at full speed, completely in line with the 1,000 changes of the 4 stars domain technique. The vision of the 3 ferocious kings turned black at the same time, and they instantly lost track of the other 2 ferocious kings. However, after receiving the guidance of the ferocious beast king, who was a bystander, they no longer hesitated. Almost at the same time, the 3 ferocious kings raised their energy with all their might and launched an attack toward the 1,000 changes of the 4 stars domain technique. This was because they were very clear that no matter what kind of domain it was, it had a certain tolerance towards energy. Once the boundary was broken, regardless of the power of the domain, it would be directly broken. Of course, this method of breaking the domain consumed a lot of energy, but given the current situation, this was the only way they could leave this place that made them feel somewhat panicked. A huge purple energy dragon condensed around the body of the deep-sea netherworld dragon king. It was completely formed from the powerful water energy of his body, and with the energy of the NEI pill as its core, it exploded with his strongest attack. After all, in his heart, he had a very high opinion of Qiyu and was afraid that he would not be able to achieve the desired effect if he did not put in enough effort. The Great Rock Wisdom King and the Chaos King did the same thing. The long blade in the Great Rock Wisdom King's hand shattered instantly, and the greenish-blue blade fragments turned completely golden. Under the effect of the energy in his body, each fragment was like a missile, exploding in all directions at the same time. Meanwhile, the Chaos King directly transformed into his own body. His super-huge body was like a balloon, shooting out thousands of gray air currents at the same time, bombarding the surroundings at the same time, indiscriminately bombarding the 1,000 changes of the Big Dipper realm technique. Qiyu was very calm at this moment. In fact, he had been building up momentum for himself, and this was the effect he wanted. The 3 fierce kings could not see him and Wenting, but he and Wenting could clearly see what the 3 fierce kings were doing. The 2 of them looked at each other, and Wenting smiled at Qiyu and nodded gently. Then, the huge energy in Wenting's body surged crazily into Qiyu's body like a tidal wave, and Qiyu's thundercloud force completely erupted at the same time. He raised his right arm high, and the black, silver and red light condensed into a huge light pillar that shot into the sky. While the 1,000 changes of the Big Dipper realm technique was being destroyed by the 3 fierce kings, Qiyu had raised it to the limit, and this was also the absolute limit of what he could do at the moment. The incomparably huge thundercloud force was completely condensed in this light pillar, and at this moment, Qiyu completely unleashed the 1,000 changes of the Big Dipper realm technique. The 3 fierce kings could not see the light pillar that shot into the sky, and at this moment, they could clearly feel that the energy within the 1,000 changes of the Big Dipper realm technique had begun to fluctuate violently, and the surrounding dark red space surged continuously like waves. Sensing this situation, they thought that the 1,000 changes of the Big Dipper realm technique was about to be broken, and immediately increased the output of their energy without hesitation, attempting to destroy this energy domain that was bothering them in one go. At this moment, Wen Ting had already hugged Qi Yu's body from behind, and she did not hold back the slightest bit of energy towards Qi Yu. The Kirin pearl in front of Qi Yu's chest erupted with an unprecedentedly bright light, and his Kirin arm trembled slightly because of the excessive energy. Lin Bing Do Zhe Jie Zhen Lai. Qi Yu was currently at the 6 cloud level, and originally, he could only use the first 6 words of the 9 syllables mantra, but with the help of Wen Ting's energy, he was actually able to shout out the 7th word. When the 9 syllables mantra left his mouth, the 1,000 changes of the Big Dipper realm technique finally began to operate according to Qi Yu's plan. At this moment, whether it was the Deep Sea Hades Dragon King's Purple Dragon, the Rock Wisdom King's Ice Blade, or the Chaos King's Chaotic Qi, at this moment, all of them frantically gathered towards the 3-colored light pillar that was brought out from Qi Yu's right fist. Relying on the wonders of the 1,000 changes of the Big Dipper realm technique and all the energy of Qi Yu and Wen Ting, they actually led the energy of the 3 fierce kings to change direction, or rather, under the effect of the 1,000 changes of the Big Dipper realm technique, their energy was instantly transferred. That was the energy of 3 humanoid ferocious beasts with more than 20,000 years of cultivation. There was probably no one in this world who would dare to say that they could transfer their energy in such a manner. Transferring and defending were completely different, and the amount of energy consumed and control required was too much. In particular, the consumption of mental strength was definitely an astronomical figure. However, after all, Qi Yu and Wen Ting managed to do it. With the help of the origin of nature and Kirin's own mental strength, Qi Yu finally managed to do it with the help of the 1,000 changes of the Big Dipper realm technique. With a loud bang, the 1,000 changes of the Big Dipper realm technique turned into countless dark red light spots and floated away. The 3 ominous kings felt their eyes light up at the same time, and everything returned to normal. However, before they could rejoice, they were shocked to find that the 3 people from the Creation's network had gathered together. They were all leaning against each other, and their energy was flowing in one direction. The purple dragon, the golden ice blade fragments, and the huge amount of chaotic qi were all shooting in one direction, and the destination of that direction was none other than the ferocious beast king that they were most afraid of. The expressions of all the other ferocious beasts changed when they sensed the joint attack of the 3 great ferocious kings. The combined power of the 3 great ferocious kings was far too powerful, and even space itself seemed to be torn apart by them. Black cracks appeared out of nowhere in midair, bringing with them a powerful suction force. The king of the ferocious beasts did not even have the chance to dodge at this moment. Almost at the instant when the 4 stars domain technique is shattered, the enormous power of the combined attack of the 3 great ferocious kings had already reached him. Qi Yu and Wen Ting were thousands of meters away. This was originally their best chance to escape, but their energy had already been exhausted. At this moment, they could only rely on Qi Yu's rapid absorption of the energy molecules in the air to support the energy consumption of his Kirin transformation, so that they would not fall from the sky. The outcome that Qi Yu had meticulously planned had finally appeared. At this moment, the situation had become that the 3 ominous kings had concentrated all their strength to launch a sneak attack on the ferocious beast king. This was what Qi Yu wanted. He did not know what the outcome would be, but he was looking forward to it in his heart. Whether the 3 ominous kings destroyed the ferocious beast king, or both sides suffered, to Qi Yu, it would be very satisfactory. As long as the ferocious beast king was no longer there, their chances of survival would be greatly increased. When the ferocious beast king was suddenly faced with such a powerful attack, he immediately displayed the strength of the strongest in the ferocious beast world. His reaction speed alone was enough to make any ancient giant beast admire him. In a few milliseconds, the ferocious Beast King's body changed into several different positions. He had no possibility of dodging. His aura had already been completely locked on by the energy in front of him. However, he could still retreat. At the moment of crisis, the four young ferocious beasts closest to the ferocious Beast King were forcibly moved in front of him. With a loud bang, they turned into powder. However, it was also in this short period of time that the ferocious Beast King's body had undergone earth-shattering changes. He was still in his original form, but in an instant, his body had actually expanded to 100 meters tall. Two giant horns drilled out from both sides of his head. At the same time, his enlarged hands clasped together in front of his body and blasted out with all his might. A brownish-yellow energy with a diameter no smaller than the combined attack of the three ominous kings forcibly resisted the attacks of the three ominous kings. At this moment, the three ominous kings had realized that their attack target was not right. They had already stopped adding energy to their bodies. Under this situation, the ferocious Beast King's energy had exploded. Boom. Chapter 130. Although Qi Yu and Wen Ting were thousands of meters away, they were also sent flying by the aftershock of the shockwave. Qi Yu was very smart and did not block it. Instead, he borrowed the force of the shockwave and flew far away. The Beast King floated in the distance and did not move, as though nothing had happened. Meanwhile, the three fierce kings were sent flying hundreds of meters away from the attack. The Chaos King spat out a gust of black fog from his mouth, while the Rock King and the Deep-Sea Abyssal Dragon King had golden and purple blood flowing from the corners of their mouth. Although the three of them had restrained their strength in the end, they were still injured by the Beast King's brazen attack. This was an outcome that Qi Yu had not expected. The three fierce kings were also completely stunned by the scene in front of them. The strength displayed by the Beast King was so terrifying. At this moment, the clothes on his body had completely disappeared and were densely covered with layers of thick stratum corneum. The black fog on his face had also disappeared. What Qi Yu saw was a huge bull's face. Coupled with the huge bull's horns on his head, he looked like a monster with the head of a bull and the body of a human. At this moment, the eyes of the Beast King had turned blood-red. His reaction was very fast. He casually waved his hand in the air, and a huge three-pronged heaven-dragging trident was already in his grasp. He roared angrily, "Change the heavens." Qi Yu and Wen Ting could clearly feel the air around them change in an instant. It was as if they were in the Jade Pearl Realm technique of 1,000 possibilities and 100 changes. The two only felt their vision blur, and they had actually returned to 100 meters away from the ferocious Beast Kings. In front of the ferocious Beast Kings that were over 100 meters tall, this short distance of 100 meters was practically negligible. At this moment, the three ferocious kings were behind Qi Yu and Wen Ting. With a faint bitter smile on his face, Qi Yu sent a telepathic message to Wen Ting. It seems that in the face of absolute power, all techniques are useless. This guy is really too strong. I'm afraid that even the most powerful Kirin of this era will not be his match. Ting Ting, it seems that we are really going to die on the same day. Wen Ting nestled in Qi Yu's arms and closed her eyes. She did not say anything and just quietly stuck to Qi Yu, waiting for the final moment to come. "King, I didn't do it on purpose." The three fierce kings cried out sorrowfully almost at the same time. They actually knelt down in the air and looked at the huge body of the Beast King in horror. The Beast King snorted coldly and waved the trident in his hand. The King of Beasts coldly snorted, gently waving the trident in his hand. "It has been many, many years since anyone was able to make me angry, but today, he did it. You three pieces of trash, why don't you scram to the side? This is the first time and also the last time. If I see you being so stupid again, I will make you regret being born into this world. Scram immediately, get out of my sight, I don't want to see you." "Yes, yes." The three fierce kings acted as if they had been pardoned and quickly flew away. When it came to flying, the Rock King was definitely the first to disappear. The Chaos King and the Deep-Sea Hades Dragon King also fully displayed their ability to escape. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared from the sight of the Beast King. At this moment, Chi-Yu suddenly realized a problem. He stared at the Beast King and said in a low voice, "You are injured." The Beast King looked at him coldly and said, "Are you dreaming?" Chi-Yu said indifferently, "If you are not injured, why are you in such a hurry to drive them away? It's a pity that I discovered it a little too late. Otherwise, the situation today would have been different. Whether you admit it or not, I believe in my own guess." The Beast King looked at Chi-Yu and slowly raised the huge heaven-supporting trident in his hand. "It's a pity that you are not a fierce beast. Otherwise, with your help, I am afraid the mythical beasts would have long been annihilated by me." "That's right, I am injured, but aren't you the same? Transferring the energy of those three idiots probably consumed most of your energy. Even if you use the ultimate Kirin's arm now, I am afraid you will not be able to cause real harm to me. My injury is far less serious than you think. If it had not happened so suddenly, even if those three idiots joined forces, they would not have been able to injure me. The reason why I drove them away was because I considered my state after you used the ultimate Kirin's arm, kid. You should be proud. Even your tribe members have not seen my true human form." Chi-Yu suddenly thought of something. He thought of the legend of the Yen Huang land and said in surprise, "Could you be the Bull Demon King?" The Bull Demon King was a little surprised. "You know me?" "No, that is impossible. Only those gods who are far away from this world know of my existence." Chi-Yu suddenly burst into laughter as he muttered to himself, "How interesting! Who would have thought that the king of ferocious beasts would actually be the Bull Demon King? Could there also be a Sun Wukong in this world? However, the Demon King and Sun Wukong are legends that only appeared after humans entered the feudal society. It seems that those myths are still not reliable." The Bull Demon King growled, "Sun Wukong? What is Sun Wukong?" Chi-Yu smiled indifferently and said, "It is someone who can kill you." As he said this, he also knew that myths were just myth. The existence of the Bull Demon King did not mean that other mythical characters existed. The Bull Demon King said, "Kill me? In this world, there is no power that can kill me. Kirin, kid, die. Let me feel how much damage your ultimate Kirin's arm can bring to me. Is there really no power that can kill you?" A calm voice suddenly sounded from all directions. The owner of the voice was a woman. Her voice was very calm, but at this moment, no one could tell where her voice came from. The Bull Demon King's huge red eyes flashed fiercely, and an incomparably huge aura arose. He did not attack Chi-Yu and Wen-Ting, because he suddenly felt that an energy that could threaten his life had appeared, and this energy was what he was most afraid of. A faint light appeared out of nowhere, as if it came from nothingness. Two figures slowly walked out from the circle of earthy yellow light. It was a man and a woman. The woman's body was wrapped in a layer of white cloth that could not be seen. This was the first time Chi-Yu saw a cloth since he came to this era. Only her head was exposed, and her long black hair was draped over her back, all the way to her waist. Her appearance seemed very ordinary at first glance, but she had a pair of star-like eyes that seemed to be able to see through everything in the world. She calmly stared at the huge Bull Demon King. The man's hands were wrapped around the woman's waist. He was very handsome, with a head of short yellow hair that stood up, and the divine light in his eyes seemed to materialize. His burly body was at least 2 meters tall, and his shoulders were very broad. His entire body emitted a layer of yellow light, and he was covered with a layer of cloth-like armor. The armor looked very exquisite, and if one looked closely, one could see that the armor was actually the scales produced from his own body. At this moment, the Bull Demon King's frozen gaze was focused on the huge sword in his hand, and the heaven-supporting trident in his hand did not move at all. The Bull Demon King saw the huge sword, and Chi-Yu naturally saw it as well. It was not an exaggeration to describe the sword as huge. The man who had suddenly appeared was already very tall, but the sword still seemed to be in harmony with his body. The length of the sword was clearly more than 2 meters, and its width was about 25 centimeters. The hilt took up 1/3 of the length of the entire sword. Although it was still in the scabbard, one could clearly feel the invisible pressure emitted from the sword. It was this incomparably sharp pressure that caused the King of Beasts to temporarily stop attacking Chiyu. The dark yellow scabbard looked very simple, and it was unknown what it was made of. On the hilt of the sword, there was a yellow gemstone the size of a fist, emitting a faint halo. The Bull Demon King's fierce eyes narrowed, and he said in a deep voice, "Black Tortoise, Longjiang, Tu Kirin, Yi-Ra, you really came at the right time." The lady smiled, looked at the Bull Demon King, and said, "If I didn't know that the King of Beasts had brought so many beasts to the vicinity of the Tu clan, then I would be ashamed of my name as Kirin. Why are you not boasting anymore?" The Bull Demon King coldly snorted and said, "Do you think you can kill me with just your strength?" At this moment, the beasts that had been sent flying had already regrouped, and they surrounded the back of the Bull Demon King in a circular arc. The huge aura completely suppressed the 3 people, including Chiyu. At least from the side, the abilities of the 2 parties were not on the same level. Yi-Ra smiled and said, "That's right, with our strength, we really can't kill you. Even if I were to risk my life and not use the ultimate Kirin arm, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to cause any real harm to you. However, just because we can't, doesn't mean that there is no power in this world that can kill you. For example, it—" As she spoke, her gaze landed on the huge sword in the hands of the Black Tortoise and Longjiang. At this moment, the hand that Longjiang had previously wrapped around Yi-Ra's waist was already holding the hilt of the huge sword. He slowly placed the huge sword horizontally in front of him, and a faint yellow light was emitted from his back, forming a huge halo that completely protected him and Yi-Ra. His left hand was holding the scabbard, and it seemed like he could pull the huge sword out of the scabbard at any time. The fierce look in the Bull Demon King's eyes faded a little, and his gaze froze on the huge sword. He said in a deep voice, "The Xianyuan sword?" Longjiang's voice was as sonorous as metal. "That's right, it is the Xianyuan sword. The Xianyuan sword is known as the sharpest sword in the world. I wonder if it has the ability to kill you?" The Bull Demon King snorted in disdain and said, "Black Tortoise, don't think that just because you are one of the 4 guardian divine beasts, you have the right to challenge me. Do you think you can do it? Even if you have the Xianyuan sword, you are definitely not my match. No matter how powerful a divine artifact is, it depends on who is holding it. Do you think you can do it?" Longjiang said lightly, "That's right, my abilities are indeed far from yours. Even if I have the Xianyuan sword, I am still not your match. I did not expect that the King of Beasts would be a bull. This is also the first time I have seen your appearance. However, even if I am not your match, it doesn't mean that we can't destroy you. Today, even if Yi-Ra and I have to risk our lives, we will destroy you with our sword." The Bull Demon King held the trident in his huge right hand and raised it slowly. "If the Xianyuan sword was in my hands, I might be able to unleash its true power. What about you guys? You are still far from it. Today is just the right time to destroy Tu Kirin and the Black Tortoise that you brought along. My trip here was not in vain." Yi-Ra smiled faintly as her body floated forward. She reached out with her tender right hand and slowly held onto the hilt of the Xianyuan sword. The Black Tortoise changed to a posture of holding the sword with both hands as a huge amount of energy was continuously channeled into the sword. "Bull Demon King, is this how I should address you?" "Not bad, your judgment is correct. Neither Longjiang nor I have enough energy to activate the Xianyuan sword. The Xianyuan sword consumes too much energy. However, what if I use the ultimate Kirin arm to activate it? I want to know how many ferocious beasts I can destroy today, including you. If I can kill you, then my death will definitely be worth it for the entire divine beast world." A faint silver light mixed with yellow appeared. Together with the tenderness of Long Jiang, the petite Yi-Ruo suddenly looked different. Although the sword was not out of its scabbard yet, the almost indestructible sharp aura had already condensed into a formless energy and stabbed towards the Bull Demon King. The huge amount of energy kept rising, causing Yi-Ruo's long dress to flutter even though there was no wind. Her eyes had already lit up. What was flashing was the silver light that only belonged to the Kirin bloodline. During the confrontation between the two sides, Qiyu had already grabbed Wenting and flapped his wings. With the help of the golden-winged rock eagle's ability to fly 90,000 miles, he flashed to Yi-Ruo and Longjiang's side and fought together with them. Feeling the aura from the Xianyuan sword, the Bull Demon King's expression finally changed. He nodded and said, "All right, you win today. Yi-Ruo Longjiang, you have to protect the Xianyuan sword well. Don't lose it. Let's go." As he spoke, he was still facing Qiyu, but his body slowly flew backwards. The energy from his body did not decrease. Instead, it increased. 3 sharp tridents pointed at Qiyu and the other 3 and flew away with the tens of 10,000-year ferocious beasts behind him. The energy from Yi-Ruo's body did not weaken either. At this moment, her eyes looked very gentle, but there was no emotion. Her aura was completely locked on the Bull Demon King. She quietly waited for him to retreat. She did not chase or retreat. Seeing that the Bull Demon King and the ferocious beasts finally disappeared from everyone's sight, the silver glow from Yi-Ruo's body slowly faded. She seemed to have been hurt. Instantly, her face became pale. She let out a long breath. With the help of Long Jiang, she panted heavily. The energy from the Xianyuan sword also disappeared. "Senior, this..." Qiyu was about to thank her but was stopped by Yi-Ruo. She waved her hand and said indifferently, "Come with us. Let's leave this place first." The moment she finished speaking, Long Jiang hugged her body again and hurriedly headed in the direction of the Earth Race's headquarters. Qiyu saw that Yi-Ruo was not willing to say more and did not ask further. After all, it was these two who suddenly appeared and saved his and Wenting's lives. He hurriedly flapped his wings and followed behind Yi-Ruo and Long Jiang. Previously, he had used up a lot of energy. Just now, he had already returned from the second stage of the Kirin transformation to the first stage. That was why his wings turned back to gold. It did not take long. With the speed at which the 4 of them flew, they covered a distance of a few hundred kilometers in the blink of an eye. From afar, Qiyu could already see a huge village below them. The houses in these villages were mostly made of wood. Compared to the mountain earth race, they seemed to be a little more advanced. The area covered by this tribe looked very big. Not only were they on plains, but they also spanned across a huge river that was about a few hundred meters wide and part of the forest beside the river. One look and they could not see the end of it. There were at least a few 100,000 people living in this huge tribe. Yi-Ruo and Long Jiang directly flew towards the center of the tribe. Qiyu and Wenting could only follow them. Although Qiyu used up a lot of energy, with the special characteristics of his source of nature, very quickly, during the flight, he absorbed more energy than he used up. The energy in his body was already in the process of recovering. In order not to frighten the Earth race people below them, Qiyu used his own energy to conceal his body. Then, he and Wenting changed into the clothes that they brought with them in the Kirin Pearl. They once again looked like ordinary people. Yi-Ruo and Long Jiang flew all the way to the center of the tribe, where there was a hill that was about 100 meters tall before they stopped. From the sky, it was obvious that this hill had an extremely important position in the entire Earth race tribe. There were at least 10,000 soldiers guarding the surroundings of the hill. These Earth race warriors were mostly holding weapons that were made of stone or wood. Although it looked a little simple, there were more than 10,000 people stationed here. They did not seem noisy. It was obvious that they were well trained. On the hill there was a big stretch of wooden houses. Yi-Ruo and Long Jiang directly landed in front of the biggest wooden house and stopped. Turning around, Long Jiang waved to Qi Yu and Wen Ting and helped Yi Ruo into the house. Although Qi Yu was very curious as to why these two people did not speak to him, he did not ask much. From the conversation between the Bull Demon King and Yi Ruo, Qi Yu knew that these two people in front of him were strong practitioners among the divine beasts. Yi Ruo was actually a Kirin just like him. It was just that her element was only earth. Feeling the familiar aura that Yi Ruo exuded, Qi Yu finally relaxed. One must know that when he was fighting with the Bull Demon King and the other ferocious beasts, he had already made up his mind to die. However, he did not expect such an unforeseen event to happen in the end. It was he and Wen Ting who were lucky enough to escape. It was impossible to say that he was not afraid. The Bull Demon King's true abilities were too strong. Not to mention him, even if it was one of the other three great ferocious kings, he and Wen Ting would not be able to fight against them. The profoundness of the great transformation of Xuanji realm was why they could last for such a long time. However, they could only last for a while. In the end, they were not able to cause any real harm to those ferocious beasts. As they walked into the wooden house, there was a faint fragrance in the room. The layout of the wooden house was very simple. There were 5 simple wooden chairs on each side of the house. In the center, there were 2 chairs and a table. It looked like a modern conference room, but it was much simpler. There was a big window on each side of the wooden house. In this era, there was no such thing as glass. The windows were made of thin vines and seemed to be used to ward off mosquitoes. Long Jiang helped Yi Ruo to the innermost seat and sat down. He also sat down beside Yi Ruo. A yellow light flashed in his hand and the Xianyuan sword disappeared. Yi Ruo's face was still as pale as before. At this moment, her gentle eyes looked a little more lively. She pointed to the chairs at the side and gestured for Qi Yu and Yi Ruo to sit down. Qi Yu held Wen Ting's hand and sat down beside Yi Ruo. Yi Ruo suddenly coughed twice. Her face that had just turned slightly better immediately became even uglier than before. Long Jiang, who was at the side, was very nervous. He hurriedly took out a small herb and fed it to Yi Ruo. After Yi Ruo swallowed the herb, her face returned to normal. Letting out a long breath, Yi Ruo's face regained some color. Her clear eyes landed on Qi Yu's face, revealing a perplexed glint as she said, "Tell me, where did you come from? From what I know, our Kirin clan doesn't seem to have a member like you." Qi Yu was stunned. He didn't know how to answer Yi Ruo's question. Tell the truth? However, the truth was too hard for people in this era to understand. Qi Yu had a thought and said, "Senior, you should be the high priest of the Earth Race's headquarters, right?" Yi Ruo nodded and said, "That's right. I am the high priest of the Earth Race. Even within the Earth Race, not many people know my identity as Kirin. If you hadn't sent Shi Rue and the others to the clan, we wouldn't have been able to save you. Originally, I didn't believe everything that Shi Rue said. However, when I personally saw the Kirin aura coming from your body, I couldn't help but believe it. I think that the reason why the King of Beasts led so many beasts to surround and attack you is because of the Kirin aura on your body." Qi Yu smiled bitterly and said, "I'm afraid that's the reason. Let me thank the 2 seniors for saving my life." As he spoke, he pulled Wen Ting to stand up and bowed to Yi Ruo and Long Jiang. Long Jiang waved his hand and a faint airflow pressed against the 2 of them. The energy was very mellow, but it gave off a heavy feeling. It was as if there was a wall in front of them. "There's no need to thank me. No matter what, you belong to the bloodline of the divine beast. We, the divine beasts, are weak now. If we don't help each other, we might really be destroyed by the beasts in no time." "You haven't answered Yi Ruo's question. I'm also very curious. Where did you come from?" That Han Chinese saying was probably made up. "I didn't expect that the Kirin clan would have a genius like you. I feel that your age and aura are very young. However, you were able to withstand the attacks of the King of Beasts and the large number of beasts that were more than 10,000 years old. I'm really surprised." Qi Yu said, If I said that it was 70% luck, would the two seniors believe me? Alright, since you want to know, I'll tell you the truth. After thinking for a while, Chi-Yu decided to tell the truth. He could clearly feel that the two people in front of him could be trusted. Everything else could be fake, but Kirin's aura was definitely not fake. Irua's body was emitting the purest Kirin aura. Looking at her, Chi-Yu actually felt as if he had seen a family member. Irua was a little surprised as she said, "Luck?" Although the Kirin clan is an auspicious sign, in the face of absolute power, what use is luck? Not to mention you, even our king of beasts couldn't escape unscathed when faced with so many experts led by the king of beasts. However, you did it. When Long Jiang and I arrived, we saw the Chaos King, the Great Rock King, and the Deep Sea Nether Dragon King attacking the Bull Demon King. That attack was enough to change the color of heaven and earth. I don't think I can do it. I don't think I can do it. Luck is always built on the foundation of power. The bitter smile on Chi-Yu's face deepened. He realized that being overestimated wasn't a good thing. Before I tell you, I'll let a friend out. He touched his chest with his right hand. A green and blue light flashed, and the Snow Girl appeared in front of Chi-Yu and Wen-Ting. It turned out that when they started fighting, although the Snow Girl transformed into a blade, Chi-Yu never thought of using her. The reason was simple. It was because the Snow Girl called him Daddy. Chi-Yu only treated the cold Snow Girl as a friend who was in the same boat. However, the Snow Girl who called him Daddy was someone that Chi-Yu couldn't ignore. He knew that the weapon formed by the Snow Girl would definitely be powerful. However, once it was used, if the opponent had enough power to defend against it, the Snow Girl might not be able to escape the fate of death. Therefore, after using the 1000 transformation Big Dipper realm technique, Chi-Yu immediately kept the sharp blade that the Snow Girl spoke of into his Kirin Pearl. The Kirin Pearl could only be used by Kirin's source energy. Therefore, even if Chi-Yu and Wen-Ting died in the hands of those beasts, as long as the Kirin Pearl wasn't destroyed, the Snow Girl could be released when Kirin obtained it in the future. Irua's gaze paused on the Kirin Pearl in front of Chi-Yu's chest. She frowned and said, "Why is the mythological beast King's Kirin Pearl with you? What is your relationship with our king? I've never heard him mention the existence of a descendant like you." Chi-Yu adjusted his mentality and said, "I'm afraid I have to start from the beginning. Two seniors, please be mentally prepared. I'm afraid it will be hard for you to accept what I'm saying. However, it is the truth." Irua nodded and said, "When I saw the four-colored auspicious cloud energy on your body, I was already mentally prepared. You have already surprised me enough. I don't care about a little more. Tell me." Chi-Yu took a deep breath and said something shocking. "To put it simply, we don't belong to this era." Irua and Long Jiang were stunned. Irua said, "Era? Don't belong to this era? I don't understand what you mean." Chi-Yu smiled bitterly and said, "If I were you, I definitely wouldn't understand either. The thing is, we can be said to be from countless years in the future. I'm not sure exactly how many years it has been. You can understand it this way. We are from the future. Perhaps you will be able to see some clues from our clothes." Long Jiang said, "Future? You said you are from the future? Young lad, is your brain fried?" Irua wasn't as surprised as Long Jiang. She said thoughtfully, "Let him continue." Chi-Yu said, "It's like this. We are from the future. I won't tell you the details of our era. Even if I did, it would be hard for you to understand. In our era, humans had already become the rulers of the world. I am also one of them. I didn't lie when I said that I am from the Han nationality. I am indeed from the Han nationality. It's just that I am not from this era." At that moment, Chi-Yu tried his best to explain how he, Wen-Ting, and Snow Girl came to this era in a language that Long Jiang and Irua could understand. As he spoke, he kept looking at Irua and Long Jiang's expressions. The two of them gradually calmed down from their initial disbelief. The turning point that calmed them down was when Chi-Yu mentioned the reincarnation fruit. "That's it. We didn't even know what the reincarnation fruit was. We didn't expect the green phosphorus tree splitting lizard to destroy the reincarnation fruit and send us to this era. At the same time, I became the source of nature. I think that the reason why the king of beasts led those beasts to attack us was probably because of the news that the Chaos King brought to him. I don't know if we should be considered unlucky. At least, that's what I think. It doesn't feel good to be overestimated by others. If the two of you didn't use the Xianyuan sword to scare the king of beasts away, I'm afraid we would have been destroyed. Qiyu finally finished saying what he wanted to say. He heaved a sigh of relief. He could feel that he was mentally exhausted. After hearing Qiyu's words, Yiruo and Long Jiang looked at each other. Suddenly, Long Jiang's figure flashed, and before Qiyu could react, Long Jiang had already grasped the wrist of Qiyu's right hand. "Don't move." Qiyu struggled out of reflex but soon gave up. He sat there calmly and let Long Jiang's energy flow into his body. He didn't resist at all. A faint light started to circulate around Qiyu. Long Jiang's energy entered Qiyu's body, which was defenseless. Long Jiang's examination was very detailed. He didn't even let go of the tiniest meridian. After about half an hour, the energy that he released slowly went back into his body. Chapter 131. Yiruo's gentle gaze revealed a thoughtful glint. Her gaze suddenly became very strange, as if she was very excited. However, it was more of a shock. Long Jiang returned to his seat and said, "However, I still have a question. Since your abilities are not strong, and you are not even comparable to the most ordinary Kirin in the Kirin race, why were you able to resist the ferocious Beast King and his subordinates for such a long time? This is indeed hard for me to understand. Of course, it is because the energy in your body is very condensed. However, your energy is ultimately limited. Theoretically, any ferocious king could have easily killed you. Even a 10,000-year-old superior ferocious beast could have killed you. However, you persisted. Can you explain this to us?" Qiyu thought for a moment and said, "Overall, there are 3 reasons. This is also why I said that luck helped us. I was able to hold on until you arrived. Firstly, my tactics were very reasonable. I made use of the hidden conflict between the ferocious Beast King and his subordinate. At the start, the 3 ferocious kings did not attack us with their full strength. Another important reason is that I have a special ability called the Thousand Changes Big Dipper Realm technique. Using this special realm, I was able to control the attacks of the 3 ferocious kings and fight the ferocious Beast King. Unfortunately, my calculations were still wrong. The ferocious Beast King was much stronger than I had imagined. The combined powers of the 3 ferocious kings were still unable to injure him severely. It was a pity. Otherwise, if they were both injured, I might be able to escape with Tingting if I mustered all my remaining strength and used the 1,000 opportunities and ever-changing 4 stars domain. It was precisely because of this possibility that I was able to maintain my confidence in the battle against them. That's how we've been since we came to this era. That's why I told Chief Shirwei that we were searching for a ruin left behind by a god. Although I am not sure if the heavenly gods really exist. Since the reincarnation fruit has appeared, then the Kunlun mirrors might also be real. Only by obtaining it can we return to our own era." Yiruo nodded slowly and stood up from her seat. Xiao Chen walked over to Qiyu and asked somewhat urgently, "Are you sure that is a reincarnation fruit?" Without waiting for Qiyu's reply, Long Jiang continued, "I can confirm that the meridians in his body have been completely changed. Although he has a human body, after being improved by the source of nature, his body's strength and the condition of his meridians are even better than a real Qilin's. Moreover, Kirin's blood flowed through his veins. He could be said to be the real Kirin. It's just that he doesn't have Kirin's true form." Yiruo's eyes lit up. Her originally gentle gaze was now as resplendent as the stars. Perhaps it was because of her excitement, her voice trembled slightly. "Great, this is really great. Our divine beast clan finally has hope." Chi-Yu was stunned and said, Senior, although I have become the origin of nature has only strengthened my body. It is very beneficial for my future cultivation. However, it can't directly make me stronger. If I want to become stronger, I'm afraid that I'll need a long period of cultivation. Furthermore, I'm afraid that I won't be able to provide much help to all of you with my strength alone. My real goal is to return to our era. After all, that is the world that belongs to me. I still have many friends and family there. I can't stay here forever. Irua looked deeply at Chi-Yu and said, What if you can't find the Kunlun mirrors? Even if you are unwilling, you can only stay in this era. You are already very talented. The cultivation problem of the 4 auspicious clouds doesn't seem to exist for you. After the improvement of the origin of nature, you are now blessed by the heavens. I dare say that as long as you are given 100 years, you will definitely become the strongest among the divine beasts. As long as you are willing, you will receive the support of the divine beast. It is almost certain that you will become the next king of the divine beasts. Could it be that our era is not good? Are you unwilling to stay? Chi-Yu looked at Irua. He shook his head firmly and said, That's right. I admit that there are many things that attract me to this era. In this era, there aren't as many lies and schemes as we did. There is no pollution. Everything is so natural. However, this doesn't mean that I am willing to stay. No matter how bad our era is, it still belongs to us. I have to go back, no matter what. If I can't find the Kunlun mirrors, I will continue to search until I find it. As for becoming the king of the divine beasts, I have never hoped for it. At the same time, I am not a person who likes to obtain power. The more power I have, the more responsibility I have. I am very lazy and I don't have the ability to lead the divine beasts. If you are not willing to guide us to find the relics left behind by the gods, then we will find it ourselves. Irua looked at Chi-Yu as a faint smile suddenly appeared on her face. She shook her head helplessly and said, Why is every Qilin like this? Not one of them is willing to become the king of the divine beasts. I was like this in the past. My father was like this. Every Kirin is like this. Many beasts are fighting for the position of the king of the divine beasts. As for the position of the king of the divine beasts, every time there is a selection, all the Kirin want to avoid it. They would rather be idle. Sigh, now I completely believe that your Kirin bloodline is very pure. Long Jiang, who was at the side, smiled and said, Yes. From this point, I am afraid you can't blame him. After all, aren't you the same? In order to avoid becoming the king of the divine beasts, your clansmen try to avoid it before the selection. Chi-Yu looked at Irua and Long Jiang in shock and muttered, It can't be. Are all the Kirin so lazy? Irua shook her head and said, No, this is not. It is laziness. It is just that our Kirin prefers freedom and is not used to too much responsibility. If not for the fact that the Kirin clan has a high status among the divine beasts, I am afraid we would have given up the position of the king of the divine beasts. However, other than us, none of the other divine beasts can bear this responsibility. Chi-Yu, don't worry. I will not ask you to do this. I only hope that you will always remember that you are a member of the Kirin clan. Chi-Yu nodded and said, That is for sure. The Kirin bloodline has changed my life and brought me a lot. I will always be a Kirin. I am also proud to be a Kirin. Elder Irua, since you already guessed that I would not agree to stay, why did you say that the divine beasts can be saved? Irua smiled mysteriously and said, Now is not the time to tell you. When it is time for you to know, you will naturally know. However, Chi-Yu, before that, I want to hear your opinion on the divine artifact. Chi-Yu thought for a while and said, Opinion on the divine artifacts? In my opinion, a divine artifact is a very powerful weapon. I can only explain it this way. Every divine artifact has different abilities. For example, the ability of the Kunlun mirrors is what I need the most now. Irua said, You are right, but not completely right. The 10 divine artifacts can be said to be the hope of the gods in the human world. It can also be said to be the love that the gods have for our world. It is an important guarantee for the development of our era. When our world is completely on the right track and will no longer be threatened by unknown factors, the 10 great artifacts will truly disappear. Chiyu said, "Then what do you mean by these threats? Ferocious beast?" Iroha nodded and said, "Ferocious beasts can be considered a part of it. You can imagine what would happen if our world was taken over by ferocious beasts. What would happen? But at that time, the entire world would probably become a battlefield of slaughter. Apart from those who obey me, I would live, and those who oppose me would die. There would be no need for anything else. These are definitely not what the gods want to see. Only a peaceful world is the most ideal for the various races of the Yen Huang land. I have thought about what you said just now. You have shown us the future. Compared to the ferocious beasts, humans are very weak. However, humans have a stronger reproductive ability and higher intelligence than us. It is precisely because of these reasons that we will be replaced by humans sooner or later. This is not a tragedy for the ferocious beasts, but the progress of the times. However, the ferocious beasts are too strong. Hence, in order to promote the progress of the times, the 10 divine artifacts have a reason to exist. Of course, the existence of the 10 divine artifacts can also deal with some unknown factors. As for obtaining the 10 divine artifacts, it can only be explained by the word opportunity. Chiyu suddenly understood and said, "In that case, you were able to obtain the Xianyuan sword because the ferocious beasts are too strong and have reached a level that the mythological beasts cannot contend against." Iroha and Long Jiang looked at each other. Both of their expressions became bitter. Iroha sighed and said, "If the Xianyuan sword really appeared, then perhaps what you said is correct. However, the Xianyuan sword that you saw previously was only formed by our energy. Otherwise, do you think that I would be stingy with my life? If we really had the Xianyuan sword, I would not hesitate to use my ultimate Kirin's arm to activate the power of the Xianyuan sword. Even if I could not kill the Bull Demon King, I would definitely be able to severely injure him. It is a pity that we have already tried for a full 3,000 years and still have not been able to obtain the Xianyuan sword." Chiyu looked at Iroha in shock and said, What did you say? Previously, the Bull Demon King was scared away? The Xianyuan sword is fake?" Long Jiang said, "That's right. How can the Xianyuan sword be so easily obtained? Among the 10 divine artifacts, every one of them is created by heaven and earth. They are all protected by extremely strong restrictions. Even someone as strong as the Bull Demon King cannot break through the restrictions and obtain them. The existence of the 10 divine artifacts is completely in accordance with the will of the heavens. We are just too familiar with the Xianyuan sword. That is why we could use our own energy to imitate the appearance and aura of the Xianyuan sword. Under such a desperate situation, we managed to scare the Bull Demon King away. However, I am afraid that this situation can only happen once. The Bull Demon King is not a fool. He will not be fooled again." When Ting, who had not spoken since the start, could not help but ask, "What if the Bull Demon King had seen through us?" Iroha said indifferently, "Then, I would have activated the ultimate Kirin's arm. Even if I could not kill the Bull Demon King, I would at least be able to destroy a few of his subordinate. For the unprecedented Ink Kirin sword, the risk was worth it." After hearing her words, Chiyu could not help but feel deep respect for her. Iroha and Long Jiang had risked their lives to save him and the others. The way he looked at the two of them became even more respectful. "Seniors, I heard that the Xianyuan sword had been used by Huang Emperor before. Huang Emperor is from the Tu clan. If that is the case, why was the Xianyuan sword protected by the restriction?" Iroha sighed and said, "I have already said that the 10 divine artifacts are all in accordance with the will of the heavens. If we want to obtain them, we need a real opportunity to do so. When the opportunity ends, they will return to where they belong. Just like the previous time when Huang Emperor defeated the Jili people led by Qiyu, the Xianyuan sword disappeared on its own and was once again sealed in the restriction. For the past 3,000 years, we have been thinking of ways to break the restriction. After all, the divine beasts have been completely suppressed by the ferocious beast. If we want to regain the initiative, we have to first destroy the Bull Demon King. You do not belong to our era, so you do not fully understand how terrifying the Bull Demon King is. Originally, our Divine Beast clan had always held the upper hand in the battle against the ferocious beast. Although we weren't able to completely annihilate them, we were still able to suppress them. However, ever since the appearance of the Bull Demon King, the situation immediately changed. Under the leadership of the Bull Demon King, the fierce beasts have gone through thousands of years of continuous adjustment, and their strength has already surpassed us divine beasts. The Bull Demon King was an even more terrifying existence. None of us divine beasts are a match for him. You've also seen the situation today. Even with the combined strength of the three vicious kings, they were unable to destroy him, even though he might have been injured. But in an instant the fact that he was able to withstand such a powerful attack showed just how powerful he was. You should know that each of the three fierce kings is not much weaker than our deep beast king. Their combined cultivation is enough to pose a huge threat to the divine beast realm. If the Bull Demon King didn't exist, perhaps these powerful beasts wouldn't trust each other, giving us an opportunity to take advantage of. However, after the Bull Demon King appeared, the beasts became completely united, leaving us with no chance at all. Qiyu nodded and said, "So that's how it is. The Bull Demon King is indeed powerful, but the 10 great divine weapons are protected by very powerful restrictions. Since you haven't obtained it in 3,000 years, you should think of other ways. Otherwise, the fierce beasts will only become stronger, and the divine beasts will only become weaker. Is there really no other way?" Irua shook her head and said, "If there was a way, we wouldn't be in such a passive situation. Originally, I was hoping that you were the descendant of our divine beast king. Although your current strength is far from enough, with your innate talent, you might be able to become a powerful existence comparable to the Bull Demon King in terms of divine beast. Unfortunately, you come from another world. Our hopes can only be dashed." Qiyu said, "Senior, you don't have to be disappointed. Before we leave this world, as long as I'm of use, I will definitely help the divine beast. After all, I'm also a member of Kirin. Although we are from different generations, I have the responsibility to help my own clansmen." Irua's eyes lit up and she said, "Really?" Qiyu was a little surprised and said, "Of course it's true. Do you think I'll make empty promises? In today's battle, I'm already standing on the opposite side of those fierce beasts. The Bull Demon King doesn't know my true situation. In his mind, I'm afraid that I'm still a powerful Ink Kirin who can transform into a human. Even if I don't find trouble with him, I'm afraid that he will find ways to find trouble with me." Irua smiled and said, "Since you're willing to help us, then there's a chance for us to turn the situation around. Perhaps we can really destroy the Bull Demon King. As long as he's gone, then even if we can't obtain the 10 great divine weapons, we can still fight against the fierce beast. After all, we, the divine beasts, are not so easily bullied. Including me, there are a total of 7 Kirin. As long as we work together, with the help of the other divine beasts, it won't be easy for the fierce beasts to act violently." Qiyu said, "Me? Senior, do you still think that I have the ability to fight against the Bull Demon King?" Irua smiled and said, "Of course not. With your ability, you can at most fight against a 10,000-year-old fierce beast. You can't even be a superior one. However, this doesn't mean that you can't destroy the Bull Demon King. I've said it just now. It's a secret now. When it's time for you to know, I'll naturally tell you. I have an idea now. If it's possible, I hope that you can do us a favor first." Chiyu said, Senior, please say it. As long as I can help, I'll repay you. As long as I can help, I can also repay you for saving my life. Irua said, saving you is what we should do. We don't need any repayment. If I ask for your help, there will naturally be repayment. In this world, only our King Kirin knows the exact location of the 10 great divine weapons. He's also the current king of divine beasts. As long as you can help us, I'll bring you to see him and ask him to tell you where the Kunlun mirrors are kept. As for whether you can break the restriction and get the Kunlun mirrors, it will depend on your luck. Hearing this, Chiyu couldn't help but be elated. With the whereabouts of the Kunlun mirrors, he, Wenting, and Snow Girl had hope of returning. Looking at Irua, his eyes instantly lit up. He said, Senior, please say it. I'm willing to help you. Irua said, to the Earth race, the Xianyuan sword is an absolute totem. I want to ask for your help to go to the Xianyuan tomb where the Xianyuan sword is kept. If we can get the Xianyuan sword, then the resurgence of the divine beasts is just around the corner. Chiyu frowned slightly and said, Senior, you've worked hard for 3,000 years and still haven't gotten it. I'm afraid we also. Irua raised her hand and stopped Chiyu from continuing. She said, You don't have to worry about this. No matter if we succeed or fail this time, it's all your help. It's all your help. I'll bring you to see the King of Kirin. Ask him to tell you where the Kunlun mirrors are. Chiyu looked at Wenting, and Wenting nodded at him and said, All right, I promise to help you find the Xianyuan sword. However, no matter if it's for the divine beasts or for ourselves, I hope that we can prioritize our safety and not take risks easily. After all, if we lose our lives, everything else is just empty talk. Irua nodded and said, That's natural. We've entered the Xianyuan tomb many times. We know very well what kind of dangers there are. This time, the Longjiang tribe and I will enter the Xianyuan tomb with you. Although I can't say that there won't be any danger, I think that we can at least protect ourselves. You should have noticed that my body isn't very good. This isn't because of the battles with the beasts. Instead, it's because I was too hasty when we entered the Xianyuan tomb. I wanted to forcefully obtain the Xianyuan sword. Instead, I was injured by the sword aura of the Xianyuan sword. Until now, I have not recovered. After that lesson, we are much more careful. Wenting said, Senior, why do you think that we can obtain the Xianyuan sword? Irua hesitated for a while and said, Since you asked, I have nothing to hide. Only the Kirin tribe knows this secret. Actually, not every race can use the 10 great divine weapons. We've worked hard for 3,000 years without any result. This is also one of the reasons. Among the 10 great divine weapons, there are a few that can only be used by humans. The Xianyuan sword is one of them. We have also tried to nurture some human experts to cooperate with us. However, the lifespan of humans isn't as long as us beasts. In just a few decades, no matter how talented a human is, it is impossible for him to become an expert that can fight against the beasts. Thus, our efforts have been in vain. You should have heard of the 4 Clans Hero Tournament. Actually, that was set up to select experts from the various races. From the looks of it, the beasts aren't friendly to humans. Only the Jili people, that stubborn race, can obtain the approval of the beast. However, the relationship between us godly beasts and humans is friendly. This is also why I was able to become the High Priestess of the Earth race. Under our continuous efforts, the humans have built a good relationship with us godly beasts and the neutral beasts. Other than the Jili people, the other 4 races of the human race are each protected by a guardian deity. For example, the Earth race is protected by the Black Tortoise Dragon River. The Dragon River is also the guardian deity of the Earth race. The White race's guardian is the Azure Dragon, the Moon race's guardian deity is the White Tiger, and the Fire race's guardian deity is the Vermilion Bird. We tried our best to impart some abilities to the humans. However, the human body structure is too different from the beast. Thus, it is difficult to nurture true experts. However, Chi-Yu is different. Although he is a human, he has the blood of our Kirin. I believe that as long as we have his help, we might have a chance. After all, I have worked hard for 3,000 years. If I don't try, I won't be able to accept it. Chi-Yu said, "All right, let's go to Xuanyuan's tomb together. However, Senior, your body." Iroha smiled and said, "Don't worry. My body can still take it. Furthermore, I have you with me. Although I was injured by the sword aura of the Xuanyuan sword, and my injuries are very serious, even Water Kirin's marrow cleansing tendon changing technique can't heal me. However, with you around, things are different. You are the source of nature. You can activate the most primitive power of nature. As long as you are willing to help me, I think my meridians will quickly recover." Chi-Yu smiled and said, "It's my pleasure. It's my honor to be able to do something for you." Long Jiang said, "There's no time to lose. I'm sure all of you have expended a lot of energy in today's battle. Rest for today. Tomorrow, please help Iroha recover. Let's head to Xuanyuan's tomb immediately. Hopefully, we'll be able to find something there." Chi-Yu replied, "I don't need to rest. When I cultivate, I will naturally attract energy from the source of nature. I think that as long as Senior Iroha cultivates beside me, she will be able to benefit from the source of nature. We can give it a try first." It had been a month since they arrived in this era. His experiences here were more colorful than those of his time. Chi-Yu knew that Ryue and Ming must have known about his disappearance. He did not know how much time he would have to spend on the search for Kunlun mirrors in the future, so it was naturally good to shorten the time. He had another reason for going to Xuanyuan's tomb. He wanted to find out how powerful the restrictions protecting the divine artifact were. This was so that he could gain some experience when he was searching for Kunlun mirrors. Iroha said, "All right, we'll start immediately. Long Jiang, I'll have to trouble you to protect us." Long Jiang smiled and said, "There's no need to talk about trouble between us. Little brother, I still don't know your name." Chi-Yu slapped his forehead and smiled. "Look at me, I'm so impolite." He hurriedly told Long Jiang and Iroha their names. Long Jiang said, "I'll have to trouble you this time. I'll go out and protect you. You can cultivate in peace. Unless the Beast King makes a comeback, otherwise, nothing will disturb you." After saying that, he turned around and walked out of the room. Looking at Longjiang's disappearing back view, Iroha's eyes revealed a tinge of gentleness. She sighed and said, "I've troubled him. It's a pity that even though he's also a superior divine beast, he can't reach the level of our Kirin." Chi-Yu was stunned. He looked at Iroha and suddenly realized that even though Iroha and Longjiang seemed to be a couple, her feelings for Longjiang did not seem to be that of a man and a woman. When Longjiang left just now, Iroha clearly revealed a guilty look in her eyes. Iroha glanced at Chi-Yu. She seemed to have seen through Chi-Yu's doubts. "Are you guessing the relationship between Longjiang and me?" "There's no need to guess. We're husband and wife. What you're guessing is correct. However, I can't give him true love. That's why I feel guilty towards him. You asked me just now why we would place our hopes for the revival of the divine beasts on some illusory divine weapons. In fact, apart from searching for divine weapons, we also have some other plans. For example, marriage between two powerful divine beasts can easily give birth to powerful offspring. However, the reproduction ability of the Kirin clan is very poor, especially between Kirin and Kirin. Sometimes they can't even give birth to a single child. This makes it more and more difficult for us to pass on our bloodline. It's precisely because the number of Kirin can't increase that the beasts can take advantage of us. Because of this, we came up with a solution. That is to let our clansmen marry other powerful divine beasts. This way, the probability of giving birth to the next generation will be much higher. Even though we can't give birth to a real Kirin, The child that has Kirin's bloodline and the divine beast's power will definitely be much more powerful than ordinary divine beasts. At the same time, we also hoped that there would be a mutation that would give birth to a being more powerful than Kirin. However, until now we have never succeeded. Among the divine beasts other than Kirin, there are the 4 guardian divine beasts. They are the azure dragon, the white tiger, the black tortoise, and the vermilion bird. They all have their own powerful abilities. Therefore, they are the first choice for Kirin to marry. Because of this, I became Longjiang's wife. Qiyu said, Senior, is it because you don't like Senior Longjiang? That's why you said that you can't give him true love? At the same time, I have another question. There aren't many Kirin clansmen to begin with. If all of you marry other divine beasts, won't the bloodline of Kirin be cut off? Irua shook her head and said, Of course we can't let our clan be cut off. That was why I felt guilty towards the Longjiang base city. If we Kirin become husband and wife, we might be able to have a child if we work hard for the rest of our lives. However, there is no such restriction with other divine beasts. Therefore, Longjiang is my husband. At the same time, I have another Kirin's husband. My love can only be given to the husband of the same clan. What? Qiyu, Wenting, and the Snow Girl exclaimed at the same time. After all, Yan Huang had once experienced a feudal society. Hence, they could still accept polygamy. However, such polygamy was simply unimaginable. Qiyu stared at Irua in a daze. For a moment, he did not know what to say. Irua smiled faintly and said, I knew that all of you would be shocked. However, this is something that we can't do anything about. My other husband is the current king of divine beasts. He is also the clan leader of the Kirin clan. Now, all of you should be able to believe why I promised to meet him and tell you the location of the Kunlun mirrors. Chapter 132. Filled with surprise, Qiyu, Wenting and Snow Girl sat cross-legged on their respective wooden chairs and entered into a state of cultivation. 3 days later, a clear river flowed slowly from the west to the east. This river could be said to be the mother river of the Tu clan. There were many Tu clan members, numbering more than 1 million. In the headquarters of the Tu clan, close to 1/3 of them lived. This mother river was called the Qing River. The name was very simple, and it fully reflected the simplicity of the Tu clan. No one knew how long the Qing River was. After all, during the era of the ancient beasts, no one knew how to measure the length of a river. The widest part of the Qing River was 7 to 8 kilometers, and the headquarters of the Tu clan was located at the narrowest part of the Qing River. Here they had the oldest boats that could travel on both sides of the river. Early in the morning, the sun rose from the east. The bright sunlight shone on the Qing River from the side, giving it a special sense of beauty. The clear river was so deep that the bottom could be seen. It seemed to be only a few meters deep, but those who were familiar with the water knew that this was not the true depth of the Qing River. In the river, some peculiar fishes could be seen swimming freely in this unpolluted, clear river. Qiyu, Wenting, Snow Girl, Irua and the Longjiang couple stood beside the Qing River. Looking at the clear and crystalline river, the 5 of them had different expressions in their eyes. Qiyu asked curiously, Seniors, is Xuanyuan's tomb under this river? Irua nodded and said, If not, I wouldn't have led the Tu clan to settle down here. This Qing River is very special. On the surface, it doesn't look very deep. However, there are many whirlpools at the bottom of the river. One of them is the path that leads to Xuanyuan's tomb. Because of its uniqueness, it is very secretive. The beasts have been searching for the 10 great divine weapons. The reason why they couldn't find their targets is because of the secrecy of the 10 great divine weapons. Wenting blushed and said, But I don't know how to swim. Furthermore, I am of the fire attribute. Irua smiled and said, It's okay. With the black tortoise here, the water won't be an obstacle for us. Longjiang smiled and said, You just need to wait until we reach Xuanyuan's tomb. As he spoke, he shouted, and his huge body suddenly rose into the air and landed in the Qing River. Just as he was about to reach the surface of the river, Long Jiang's body suddenly became perpendicular to the surface of the river. Immediately after, an intense yellow light surged from his body. The slowly flowing river suddenly stopped for a moment. In the next moment, Long Jiang's body landed steadily on the surface of the Qing River. The yellow light grew larger and larger until it was so intense that no one could look at it directly. The area covered by the light expanded outwards. Long Jiang's body had already disappeared. When Qi Yu and the other two regained their vision, they could feel an incomparably heavy pressure emanating from the Green River. In front of them, a giant turtle floated on the surface of the river. The turtle's body was oval in shape and there was a black shell on its back. The patterns on the turtle's shell were golden and exceptionally clear under the rays of the morning sun. When Qi Yu took a closer look, he was shocked to discover that this giant turtle's body was over 30 meters long and 20 meters wide. It could completely be considered as a large ship. The turtle raised its head and its yellow eyes looked like transparent gems. Long Jiang's voice could be heard. "Come on up. As long as you are on my back, you don't have to worry about anything else." Irua smiled and said, "This is the original body of the black tortoise. He has the water and earth attribute. In the water, even the strong deep-sea nether snake has to be afraid of him." Hearing Irua mention the deep-sea nether snake, Qi Yu couldn't help but feel moved. He said, "How could I forget about him? Big brother nether snake, come on out." With a flash of light, the deep-sea nether snake's huge body appeared out of thin air. Before Qi Yu could speak to it, it had already roared happily and dived into the water, creating a huge splash. "Awesome, this is too awesome. I haven't felt this good in a long time. Qi Yu, I realized that ever since my cute white lady appeared, my luck seems to be getting better and better. Even the ferocious Beast King didn't destroy us. Now I have this river for me to swim in. This is too awesome." Irua was a little surprised as she said, "Is it your command?" Qi Yu nodded and said, "Yes, it's also my partner." Irua nodded approvingly and said, "That's right. Our command is also a partner. Since you have your own water attribute beast, let's go. Let your partner follow Long Jiang." As she spoke, she had already floated up and landed lightly on Long Jiang's back. After 3 days of cultivation and with the help of the source of nature, Irua's injuries had basically recovered. She just needed to rest for a period of time and she would be able to recover to her previous best state. Qi Yu, Wenting, and Snow Girl leaped up at the same time. The deep-sea nether snake raised its 3 heads at the right time and caught the 3 of them. Long Jiang didn't seem to like the deep-sea nether snake very much. He only greeted Qi Yu before his huge body sank into the Green River. Without needing Qi Yu to say anything, the deep-sea nether snake's body emitted a layer of purple light which protected the 3 of them. The huge snake's body sank and followed closely behind Long Jiang. The black tortoise had the strongest defense among the water attribute beasts. However, in terms of speed in the water, it was still slightly slower than the deep-sea nether snake. Although Long Jiang had cultivated to the stage where he could transform into a human form, he still couldn't catch up with the deep-sea nether snake even if he swam with all his might. In the Green River, with the protection of the deep-sea nether snake's energy, Qi Yu and the other 2 felt as if they were in a submarine. The surrounding water and the creatures in the water were all isolated by the light shield. There was sunlight shining on the surface of the water. In this clear river, it was a strange and dazzling scene. That gorgeous feeling was incomparable to that on land. The deep-sea nether snake was obviously very excited. While following Long Jiang, its huge body kept swaying in the river. Every time it swayed, the water would ripple. Long Jiang swam quickly in one direction. After a short while, Qi Yu saw the whirlpool that Irua had mentioned. About 10 meters below the water, he could clearly see many small white whirlpools rotating continuously. the whirlpools brought along the sand and stones at the bottom of the river, making the water a little muddy. The whirlpools were of different sizes and each had a suction force. However, these suction forces were obviously useless against a super fierce beast like the deep-sea nether snake. Long Jiang didn't even hide and directly went through the whirlpool. Under his protection, Qi Yu and the other two didn't even feel the slightest tremor, except for the changes in the scenery around them. Qi Yu couldn't help admiring Long Jiang in his heart. The deep-sea nether snake was indeed very powerful in the water. No wonder it could become one of the most powerful fierce beasts. When it reached the level of the deep-sea abyssal dragon, it was unknown how powerful it would be. At the thought of this, Qi Yu couldn't help but feel even more grateful for being able to escape from the fierce beasts led by the king of beasts. The black tortoise Long Jiang moved forward for about 10 minutes and suddenly stopped. Its huge body stuck to the bottom of the river and looked back at the deep-sea nether snake and Qi Yu's group. The Longjiang's voice rang in Qi Yu's mind. "We are here. Be careful later. The whirlpool in front of you is just a whirlpool. Try to shrink your body to the smallest size possible and then go in. Don't stop, otherwise you will be thrown out by the whirlpool." Qi Yu was a little surprised as he looked for the whirlpool that the Longjiang had mentioned. After careful observation, he realized that there was a whirlpool with a diameter of about 1 meter spinning slowly about 10 meters in front of him. It didn't look strange at all. In fact, the water flow wasn't as fast as the whirlpools from before. Could it be that this was the entrance to Xuanyuan's tomb? Long Jiang used his actions to answer Qi Yu's doubts. His huge body slowly shrunk, and a yellow light flashed as he turned into a 1-meter-wide tortoise. At this moment, Irual looked a little out of place standing on his back, but Long Jiang's body emitted a yellow light. However, the yellow light that Longjiang's body was emitting still protected Irual completely. The speed of its movement suddenly increased. It first rose above the whirlpool. Then, the yellow light suddenly shrunk. The Longjiang had already rushed into the whirlpool with Irual. The light flashed, and the human and turtle disappeared. Qi Yu hurriedly passed the Longjiang's words to the deep-sea nether snake. The deep-sea nether snake didn't dare to be careless. It quickly mimicked the Longjiang and shrunk its body. However, it wasn't as strong as the Longjiang. When its body shrunk to 5 meters, it was already its limit. Luckily, its body was slender and not as big as the Longjiang. It brought Qi Yu and the others to the top of the whirlpool like the Longjiang. The purple light suddenly became stronger. Qi Yu suddenly felt weightless. The deep-sea nether snake had already rushed into the whirlpool with the 3 of them. The feeling of stability disappeared, and the weightlessness became stronger. Qi Yu had no choice but to use his own energy to stabilize the head of the deep-sea nether snake. The light flashed, and everything around him seemed to have been sucked out. He clearly felt that the deep-sea nether snake's energy was leaking out. Then, the scenery around him changed instantly. The clear river water turned into a large patch of golden light. As the light shone, Qi Yu couldn't see anything around him anymore. There was a huge pressure coming from the surroundings. The deep-sea nether snake used all its energy. The pressure seemed to be increasing gradually. Every time the pressure increased, the deep-sea nether snake would release more energy. Luckily, this situation didn't last for too long. The golden light suddenly disappeared. Qi Yu felt his body lighten, and the scenery around him changed again. With a bang, the deep-sea nether snake's shrunken body fell to the ground. Everything around him suddenly became clear. Qi Yu was surprised to find that the 3 of them and the deep-sea nether snake came out from a huge golden door. The golden door seemed to be completely filled with energy. The golden energy was in the shape of a whirlpool and moved rhythmically. Obviously, this was the real door to Xuanyuan's tomb. Irual and the Longjiang were not far from them. Compared to the deep-sea nether snake, the Longjiang looked much more elegant. At this moment, he had already changed back to his human form, as if nothing had happened. He was smiling at Qi Yu and the others. Chiyu felt that the deep-sea nether snake had used up too much energy. He quickly kept the deep-sea nether snake back into his body. Only then did he have time to observe everything around him. Chiyu found that they were on a platform. The ground was very smooth, as if it was carved out of jade. This place was very bright. However, they didn't know where the light came from. Looking around, they couldn't help but be shocked by the situation in front of them. In front of the platform they were on, there were countless white pillars. It seemed that the material was the same as the platform they were on. These pillars were about a meter in diameter. The top of these pillars was parallel to the stone platform they were on. It was like a relay station, scattered messily on the path in front of them. The distance between these pillars was also different. The closer ones were about 7 to 8 meters, while the farther ones were dozens of meters. They were scattered in the space in front of them. Besides the golden door behind them, the surroundings were filled with such white pillars. Around these pillars they could clearly feel the changes in the huge energy. The energy was very erratic and uncertain. There were no rules to speak of. It was constantly floating parallel to the pillars. Although the energy didn't attack them, Chiyu could still clearly feel how terrifying it was. The sharpness seemed to be able to cut through everything. The energy seemed to be individual. Although the gaps between them weren't small, because of their irregular movements, these gaps could be said to be there or not at all. In between the pillars, apart from the energy, looking down, there was a bottomless abyss. The black abyss was filled with a terrifying aura. It was as if there were countless big mouths that wanted to swallow everything. Looking through these pillars and directly in front of the golden door, there was a flight of stairs that led to a higher place about 3 kilometers away. The highest place was about 100 meters away from where they were. There seemed to be a platform at the top. It was shining with a radiance that was as dazzling as the sun. Without a doubt, that was where the Xianyuan sword was. Chiyu and the other two walked to the side of Long Jiang and Iruo. Chiyu said, "Seniors, how should we go?" Iruo said, "How about this? To avoid unnecessary trouble and to allow us to take care of ourselves, Chiyu, you can follow us. These two ladies can stay here and wait. Chiyu, you have to follow us closely later. If there are any changes, don't worry. We will help you." Snow Girl looked at Chiyu and didn't say anything. Ever since she called Chiyu Daddy that day, she rarely spoke. It was as if she had become the iceberg Snow Girl again. There was a tinge of concern in her eyes. She didn't say anything and directly sat cross-legged on the platform. When Ting said to Iruo, "Senior, is the Xianyuan sword on that platform?" Iruo nodded and said, "That's right. It's on that platform. This is the Xianyuan tomb, the tomb of the Xianyuan sword." When Ting was a little puzzled and said, "Since it's on that platform, can't we just fly over directly? Although there is energy here and it seems to be very strong, the defensive energy only seems to be swimming above the pillars. It doesn't rise." Long Jiang said, "If only it was so simple. We can't fly here. If we want to go forward, we can only jump. If you don't believe me, you can try." When Ting and Chiyu activated the energy in their bodies at the same time. Just like what Long Jiang said, they couldn't fly in this mysterious Xianyuan tomb. When they tried to activate the energy in their bodies to fly, they immediately felt their bodies sink. It was as if something was pulling their legs from below. Iruo said seriously, "You can't fly on this platform." Iruo said seriously, "On this platform, you still don't feel like you can fly. However, once we get out of here, we will be able to fly immediately. However, as long as you are more than 3 meters away from the pillar, you will immediately become a target for the sword souls. At that time, all the sword souls will attack with the power of thousands of catfish returning to their root. They will not stop until one of them is dead. Not to mention us. Even if the great firmament golden immortals were here, they would not be able to escape. Hence, when you jump later, you must control your height well. It is better to face the attacks of a small number of sword souls than to jump too high and attract a fatal disaster." Chi-Yu asked, "What is a sword soul? Is it the restriction here?" Iroha nodded and said, "It's the restriction on the outer layer. Although it's just the outer layer, it's still very powerful. You will see it later." As she spoke, she nodded at Long Jiang. Long Jiang folded his hands in front of his chest. A faint yellow light condensed into a small light ball about 3 centimeters in diameter. Then, the light ball lit up. Iroha bit her right middle finger and dripped a drop of blood on the light ball. Long Jiang shouted, and the light ball in his hand instantly exploded. A layer of pink light instantly spread out in the shape of a fan and spread to the surroundings. As the pink light engulfed the surroundings, many things that could be seen appeared in the surroundings. No, to be more accurate, they were energy that could be seen. It was what Chi-Yu felt earlier. The shape of the energy was very familiar to Chi-Yu. It was exactly the same as the Xianyuan sword that Long Jiang and Iroha carried. However, these energy swords didn't have scabbards. The blades were light gold in color, and they moved in different postures in the air. There was no need to doubt the sharpness of the energy swords. These energy swords looked translucent. Needless to say, these were the sword souls. Iroha said, "Chi-Yu, you have to be careful. The attacks of the sword souls are very scary. If you can dodge them, don't come into contact with them. If you can't, you can only attack them from the side and draw them away. Don't fight them head-on. Otherwise, you won't be able to defend against the sword soul's sharpness once they explode. Another thing is that, on the same pillar, you can only be attacked by 3 sword souls at the same time. They are intelligent. Also, they work very well with each other. Don't make any mistakes. Otherwise, you won't be able to come back up. The 3 of us will split up later. Long Jiang will be at the front, you will be in the middle, and I will be at the back. She will tie the front part to Long Jiang's waist, the middle part to Chi-Yu's waist, and the last part to herself." Chi-Yu naturally understood what Iroha meant. The 3 of them were connected together. Even if one of them made a mistake, they could still use the vines to pull him up. Looking at the sword souls in front of him, he couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Was Xuanyuan's tomb really not dangerous? However, since they were already here, there was no need to hesitate. The 3 of them made some simple adjustments. Iroha nodded at Long Jiang, and Long Jiang said to Chi-Yu, "Watch my movements. Be careful, but don't be afraid. Pay attention to the position of your attacks, especially the position. The spine of the sword is the easiest position for the sword souls to attack." When Ting said with concern, "Chi-Yu, you have to be careful. I will think of a way to help you with my energy." Chi-Yu smiled and said, "Don't worry. I have 2 seniors to protect me." Long Jiang nodded at Chi-Yu and Iroha. Then, his body flashed. He was about a meter above the stone pillar. He shot towards the first stone pillar with lightning speed. Just as he moved, the sword soul in the air attacked. A yellow light blocked Long Jiang's body and pierced towards his chest. Long Jiang, who was in the air, did not panic. When the sword soul was in front of him, he tilted his body slightly and let the sword soul fly past his chest. However, the sword soul seemed to be able to defy the laws of physics. It suddenly stopped beside Long Jiang and slashed at Long Jiang's waist. Long Jiang was prepared. He hit the spine of the sword with his right palm and stopped the sword soul. He turned in the air and landed accurately on the stone pillar. The sword soul had no intention of letting Long Jiang go. It quickly chased after Long Jiang from behind. However, Long Jiang had the stone pillar as his base. He didn't move his feet. Instead, he used his palms to hit the spine of the sword and sent the sword soul flying. Although he couldn't hurt the sword soul couldn't do anything to him. Long Jiang waved at Chi-Yu, asking him to go over. Chi-Yu floated up. As expected, once he was out of the platform, his body was no longer affected by the suction force. Luckily, Iroha had warned him before, so he didn't act rashly. He controlled his body and flew towards the pillar where Long Jiang was. The sword soul that attacked Long Jiang seemed to have sensed Chi-Yu's aura. With a flash of light, the sword soul suddenly slashed at Chi-Yu in the air. Chi-Yu felt the threat from the sword soul. Although the sharp chi didn't break the air, his protective thundercloud force felt like it was about to be torn apart. Chi-Yu didn't dare to be careless. He tilted his body slightly in the air and changed his position flexibly. He almost brushed past the sword soul and landed beside Long Jiang. It was the first time for Chi-Yu to use Kirin in the air, but the effect was surprisingly good. With the support of the six-cloud thundercloud force, he could use his power much better than before. Long Jiang slapped away the sword soul and nodded to Chi-Yu. At this time, Yi Ruo's graceful figure followed Chi-Yu to the top of the pillar. The diameter of the pillar was about 3 meters, so it became a bit crowded with 3 people standing on it. However, the 3 of them were all very powerful. They stood back to back and waved their palms to block the sword soul's attack. Most of the sword soul's attacks were blocked by Yi Ruo and Long Jiang. Chi-Yu also came into contact with the sword soul twice. He was shocked to find that the sword soul's energy was as heavy as a mountain. Although he slapped the sword's spine, the recoil was already very shocking. If he hadn't reached the 6-cloud level, this sword soul would have brought him a lot of trouble. Yi Ruo said in a deep voice, "Chi-Yu, you have to pay attention later. We will choose the shortest route to advance, and we will have to pass through 3 parts. We are now in the first part, and there will only be 1 sword soul attacking. In the middle part there will be 2 sword souls, and in the last part there will be 3 sword souls. When we get close to the high platform, there will be 3 stone pillars that will be attacked by 6 sword souls. When you advance, your body can't exceed a certain distance above the stone pillars, but at the same time, you can't be lower than the level of the stone pillars. Otherwise, the suction force from below will immediately swallow you. No matter how strong your flying ability is, it will be useless. Do you understand?" Chi-Yu felt a chill in his heart. Now, he understood the importance of the vines entangled around him. He nodded and said, "Let's continue." After passing through the first stone pillar, he already had a certain understanding of the stone pillar array protected by the sword souls. Under the continuous attacks of the sword souls, their energy was constantly being consumed. Only by passing through this place as soon as possible could they better preserve their energy. After Long Jiang signaled to the 2 of them, he floated up and landed on the second stone pillar. As soon as he left, the sword soul that was responsible for protecting the first stone pillar gave up on attacking him and concentrated on attacking Chi-Yu and Yi Ruo. Yi Ruo slapped the sword soul away with her palm. Her earth attribute thundercloud force was very strong. Wherever the energy passed, the sword soul was pushed back 5 meters. With another hand on Chi-Yu's shoulder, Yi Ruo shouted, "Let's go." Chi-Yu did not dare to hesitate. He hurriedly jumped up and chased after Long Jiang towards the second stone pillar. At this moment, he finally understood why Yi Ruo and Long Jiang put him in the middle. In this case, Long Jiang would be responsible for blocking the sword souls in the front and Yi Ruo would be responsible for blocking the sword souls in the back. In this way, he would be under much less pressure. Chi-Yu could not help but feel grateful for their concern. Wen Ting watched anxiously as Chi-Yu and the other 2 tried to move forward. As Yi Ruo had used her blood to support the Longjiang's energy, she was able to see the position of the sword spirits very clearly. She had already gathered a ball of fire energy in each of her hands, ready to save Chi-Yu at any time. However, when she tried to control the energy she released to protect Chi-Yu, she had no choice but to give up on the idea. This was because the moment her energy entered the stone pillar array, it was immediately blocked by the sword spirit. Although her energy was not weak, it was unable to pass through the first stone pillar's range. With Long Jiang and Yi Ruo, who were experienced, Chi-Yu and the other 2 people moved forward smoothly. One sword soul could not threaten them at all. In the beginning, in order to let Chi-Yu get used to the attack of the sword souls, Yi Ruo and Long Jiang moved forward slowly. When Chi-Yu gradually figured out how to deal with the sword souls and how to attack them, the the speed of the three people's advance was greatly increased. In about 20 minutes, they had already entered the middle section of the stone pillar. The increase from one sword soul to two did not sound like much, but Chi-Yu realized that the pressure from the two sword souls had increased by at least 3 times. This was because the sword souls with intelligence could actually coordinate with each other, and the 3 of them dared to fight them head-on. This meant that they had to spend more energy to sense the position of the sword souls when they attacked. From the original head-on resistance to the increased dodging, the speed of the 3 of them was greatly reduced, but at the same time, the use of energy in their bodies was greatly increased. In order not to be a burden to Iruo and Long Jiang, Chi-Yu had already entered the first stage of Kirin transformation. With the protection of the Kirin armor, his energy had increased by a lot. At the same time, he summoned the Kirin mirror. With the defensive power of the Kirin mirror, although he still did not dare to fight the sword souls head-on, he could still find the position of the sword spine more easily. Another 2 sword souls shot towards Chi-Yu. At this moment, Chi-Yu was in the air. Every time he approached a stone pillar, it was the most dangerous moment for Chi-Yu. After all, it was only at this moment that he had to face the attacks of the sword souls alone. If there was no space restriction, perhaps Chi-Yu could rely on the golden-winged rock eagle's ability to soar up 90,000 miles to dodge the attacks of the sword souls. However, now that he was confined in this narrow space, all he could do was dodge left and right. Chi-Yu's body was constantly flickering in the air. Qilin Envoy Chi-Yu's body constantly flickered in the air. Due to his extreme speed, he left a series of afterimages behind him. There was no place for him to borrow strength from in the air, but Chi-Yu could rely on his body's energy to float. Although he couldn't fly high, he wouldn't fall either. Under such circumstances, he made full use of his body's agility. Seeing the 2 sword souls flying towards him, he circled his right hand in front of his chest, and a bolt of lightning shot out from his palm, striking the sword soul that was stabbing towards him. Because a frontal attack was practically useless against a sword soul, Chi-Yu intentionally moved his right palm to the side, striking the sword soul's blade from the side. The sword soul let out a buzzing sound, and its forward momentum immediately slowed. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Chi-Yu made a beautiful turn in the air, dodging the sword soul that was slashing towards him. His left hand slapped out with the Qilin mirror and struck the spine of the sword soul with a heavy fiery cloud energy, sending the sword soul flying 2 meters back. At the same time, his body flew forward, almost brushing against the first sword soul. Just as the sword soul was about to slash at Chi-Yu, he cleverly pressed the Qilin mirror forward, stopping the sword soul's spine and preventing it from flipping over. Chapter 133. The 3 of them were connected by a long vine and leaped towards the depths of Xuanyuan's grave like a shooting star. The attack power of the sword soul was extremely strong, so Chi-Yu dared not be distracted at all. In the process of fighting the sword soul with all his strength, he also entered the process of mastering all kinds of Kirin's abilities. After all, although he had fought many battles before, it was the first time for him to fight such a long battle of attrition. Facing such a situation, Chi-Yu unknowingly realized that the recovered thundercloud force was gradually cooperating with his spiritual power. Although there was still a huge gap between the peerless behemoths that he had encountered in this era, it was enough for Chi-Yu. As he gradually adapted, he had grasped the rhythm of moving forward. In the beginning, he only relied on Kirin and thundercloud force to fight against the sword soul. Gradually, he evolved to use all kinds of Kirin's abilities to achieve the best effect by using the least amount of thundercloud force. At the same time, as he continued to move forward, Chi-Yu also discovered that although the energy condensed in his body was not as large as when he was at the 4-cloud level, the consumption rate was very slow when he used it. Supporting the first stage of Kirin's transformation did not cause him too much consumption. On the contrary, the various energy molecules in Xuanyuan's grave were very dense. In the process of continuous absorption and consumption, the overall consumption rate was actually very slow. This discovery made Qi Yu's confidence soar in the process of moving forward. His spiritual power was spread out within 30 square meters of his body. Whenever the sword soul launched an attack, he could always react in time. From being a little flustered at the beginning, to being able to deal with 2 sword souls with ease, it only took about 20 minutes. Finally, the 3 of them slowed down again because they had entered the later stage of the cylindrical formation. The 2 sword souls had become 3, and the attack power had suddenly become different. Qi Yu suddenly found that there was one more sword soul attacking him. Although he was shocked, he did not panic at all. With his previous experience, he was very confident in facing the sword souls. Seeing the 3 sword souls rushing towards him in a triangular formation, he slightly leaned his body in midair. At the same time, the thundercloud force in his body surged, and a cyan light appeared in the palm of his right hand. This cyan light did not look big, but the wind thundercloud force that was condensed in an instant was compressed by Qi Yu. In addition, his own thundercloud force was originally compressed and condensed, so under the double compression, a large amount of explosive energy was accumulated. The 3 sword souls arrived in front of Qi Yu in a flash. His movement was very simple. He lowered his body by half a meter. At the same time, a cyan light flashed in his palm. The spherical cyan light left Qi Yu's palm and changed into a small vortex the size of a fist. The surrounding air was twisted for a moment. Then, Qi Yu's left hand shot out a purple electric light into the small vortex. All of a sudden, the surrounding air rippled like water. An extremely strong suction force surged out, causing the 3 sword souls to stagnate and shrink towards the direction of the vortex. At the same time, the momentum of the 3 sword souls suddenly slowed down. Qi Yu's reaction was very fast. Although the 3 sword souls were only slowed down for a moment, it was enough for him. A golden shadow appeared behind him. Stepping on Kirin, Qi Yu turned his body nimbly in midair and passed by the 3 sword souls quietly. He caught up with Long Jiang in front of him. At the same time, the small vortex he created was still working. It was as if the 3 sword souls were attached to the 3 sword souls and they continued to fly towards Iruo. The 3 sword souls were not a threat to Iruo. Under the effect of the wind and thunder vortex, their speed was greatly reduced. Iruo didn't even need to defend herself. She also used Kirin and arrived at the stone pillar. When the 3 sword souls were about to turn around and attack, the energy of the small vortex suddenly expanded. The thundercloud force, which was shining with the electric light, sealed the 3 sword souls in an instant and made them spin. Although they only rotated once, it was enough for Qi Yu and the other 2 to take a breather. Long Jiang praised, "Good, the western auspicious cloud Qilin is indeed extraordinary, let's continue forward." The wind and thunder vortex that Qi Yu created was named Wind and Thunder Attraction. It wasn't an ability that Kirin originally had. Instead, it was created by Qi Yu based on the common characteristic of vortexes and thunderbolts, attraction. Although it could only limit the attack speed of the sword souls, it would shine in the future when Qi Yu used it. The wind lightning guide did not consume a lot of energy. Of course, this was only for Qi Yu. After all, his energy had been compressed. Even if others had the wind and lightning attributes, they would not be able to create the same effect in such a short period of time. Moreover, there were only a few ancient beasts that possessed these 2 abilities at the same time, let alone a Qilin. Not to mention, there were only a few ancient beasts that possessed these 2 abilities, and some of them were not even at the top. With the help of the wind and thunder attraction, the 3 of them reached the range of the 3 sword souls. Their speed of advancement increased. At first, Iruo and Long Jiang were afraid that Qi Yu would consume too much energy, so they asked him to save some of his thundercloud force. Later on, they realized that Qi Yu, who had the Kirin bead, didn't seem to be weakened after using the wind and thunder attraction. Moreover, after using the wind and thunder attraction, the energy was guided by Qi Yu's mental strength and could be controlled and condensed again. Although the process would consume a lot of energy, it was enough for him to save some of his own energy. With the wind and thunder attraction, advancing was no longer a problem. As the weakest among the three, Qi Yu was able to play the most important role at this moment. They were almost at the bottom of the white jade stairs. Iroha shouted, "Be careful." Qi Yu knew that they were about to reach the last 3 stone pillars where the 6 sword souls would attack. When the 3 of them reached the middle of the last 3 stone pillars, they would at most be attacked by 12 sword souls at the same time. This was also the most dangerous part of the entire stone pillar array. He didn't dare to be careless. It wasn't the time to waste energy. 2 wind and thunder attractions that were twice the size of the previous one appeared in Qi Yu's hands at the same time. When Longjiang flew out, 2 wind and thunder attractions flew out at the same time. 2 streaks of purple lightning directly entered the green ball of light and formed the real attraction force of the wind and thunder attraction. The 6 sword souls appeared around Longjiang in a flash. At this moment, Longjiang finally showed his true strength. At that moment, Qi Yu clearly saw that Longjiang's arms seemed to have turned into 6 arms. A huge amount of energy condensed around his body. Every palm strike was accompanied by the sound of wind and thunder. 6 loud sounds were heard almost at the same time. In the midst of the explosive sounds, the 6 sword souls flew out at the same time. At the moment when the 6 sword souls flew out, Qi Yu immediately activated the wind and thunder attraction. The strong attraction force forcibly pulled the 6 sword souls to a further direction. Qi Yu and Iroha also took advantage of this moment to float to Longjiang's side. The wind and thunder attraction was activated. This time, the attraction force of the wind and thunder attraction was indeed stronger. However, something unexpected happened. The 6 sword souls were divided into 2 groups. Each group had 3 sword souls. Under the attraction force of the wind and thunder attraction, the sword souls suddenly shone brightly. The 3 sword souls, which were originally more than 2 meters long, suddenly combined into one huge sword that was 4 meters long and half a meter wide. The 2 huge swords swirled in the air at the same time. At the same time, they slashed towards Qi Yu and Iroha at a speed that was disproportionate to their size. Iroha's expression changed slightly. She said in a low voice, "You go first." Qi Yu knew that this was not the time to hesitate. His body flashed and he chased after the Longjiang base city. Iroha's body released a layer of intense yellow light. Immediately after, she raised her right arm. The clothes on her arm turned into dust. Her right arm, which was shining with silver and yellow light, suddenly punched out twice. She did not attack the 2 huge sword souls. Instead, she attacked the white jade pillar under her feet. It was strange. The pillar looked like a piece of jade, but it was so tough that even Kiran's arm could not break it. The 2 huge waves of energy hit the stone pillar and made a loud noise. Immediately after, the 2 waves of energy rebounded and rushed upwards to hit the 2 huge swords that were flying towards them. With a loud bang, the 2 huge swords stopped for a moment. Iroha took the opportunity to float up and catch up with Qi Yu. The 2 of them landed on the 2nd stone pillar of the 6th sword soul almost at the same time. Because of the previous mutation, Qi Yu did not dare to use the wind thunder guide anymore. He also used the ability of Kiran's arm and chanted the 9 secret words to increase his attack power. At the same time, his Kiran transformation entered the 2nd stage. He even used Kiran's red. With the double defense, although Qi Yu's attack power could not be compared to the Longjiang base cities, it was enough to repel the obviously stronger sword souls. A golden round shield appeared on Longjiang's right forearm. The round shield was only about 20 centimeters in diameter and looked small. However, with this round shield, Qi Yu could clearly see that Longjiang was able to block 2 attacks from the sword souls. Although it was not the sharpest sword tip, it was still shocking. At that moment, he had already reached the last stone pillar. He was blocking the attacks of the 6 sword souls by himself. Iruo suddenly shouted, and a layer of yellow light floated out. The range of the light covered her and Chiyu. The surrounding sword souls were also surrounded by the light. The attack power of the sword souls did not decrease, but the speed of the sword souls was reduced by 1/5. Chiyu was a smart man. He would not give up such an opportunity. He used his thundercloud force with all his strength. The Kirin's arm punched at the 6 sword souls with 6 loud shouts. At the same time, he pulled the Ting vine on his waist and dashed towards the last stone pillar with Iruo. It looked like Iruo had expended a lot of energy to maintain this yellow light screen. Just as the two of them reached the last stone pillar, Long Jiang grabbed Iruo's waist. Just like Chiyu, he threw out 6 punches. 6 solid rays of yellow light forced the sword soul away. His other hand pushed Chiyu's backhand, with Iruo at the same time. The 3 of them were like 3 shooting stars as they charged through the sword soul formation. Passing through the last 3 stones had taken only a very short amount of time, but it had also been a thrilling experience. Chiyu's wind lightning guide was ultimately not as powerful as the 2 experts, and it was only with their help that he had managed to charge out of this land of death. Chiyu could not help but let out a long sigh as he looked back at the sword spirits that had regained their calm. He thought to himself that even if the Demon Bull King was here, he would not be able to escape unscathed if he was unfamiliar with the situation. After all, if he was surrounded and attacked by all the sword spirits in this place without a weapon comparable to the Xianyuan sword, he would not be able to withstand it. Iruo's chest rose and fell. She smiled and said, "Chiyu, your performance was much better than I expected. Although I still had to use Kirin's domain of sluggishness, you saved me a lot of thundercloud force." Kirin's domain of sluggishness? Is this an ability that can be used by Kirin? I mean, when my energy reaches a certain level, I can use this ability. Chiyu asked curiously. Iruo shook her head and said, "No, that's not it. When Kirin's ability reaches its peak, which is the 9 cloud level, we can transform into a human. At the same time, we will have an additional skill, which is our own domain. Every Kirin's domain of sluggishness is different and has different effects. My domain is this Kirin's domain of sluggishness. Although it doesn't seem to be very useful on the surface, it can neither attack nor defend. However, in a real battle, it is my trump card. Imagine, when an enemy enters my domain of sluggishness, their attack speed will suddenly decrease by 5 times. What kind of situation would that be? This kind of domain that is born at the peak is called the ultimate domain by us Kirin. When your strength reaches a certain level, you will also be able to have the ultimate domain. However, this ultimate domain has a very big weakness, which is that it consumes a lot of energy. Any Kirin's ultimate domain can only be maintained for the same amount of time. Even at its peak, the ultimate domain can only be maintained for about 10 minutes. Chiyu's eyes lit up and he said, "Although it's only 10 minutes, this 10 minutes of ultimate domain is already very useful." Iruo raised her head and looked at the steps in front of her. She smiled and said, "Actually, I really hope to see what your ultimate domain is. Every Ink Kirin that has appeared in the past has an extremely powerful ultimate domain. You are the unprecedented Ink Kirin of the 4 auspicious clouds. I think your ultimate domain in the future will definitely be beyond my imagination." Chiyu smiled bitterly and said, "I also hope to see it as soon as possible. However, it is easier said than done to cultivate to Kirin's ultimate domain. The lifespan of humans is only about 100 years. If it wasn't for fate, I wouldn't have my current strength. From what I know, the last 3 clouds of Kirin are the most difficult to cultivate. Furthermore, no external force can help them. Let's not talk about when I will be able to cultivate the highest 9 cloud. I don't even know how long it will take for me to reach the 7 clouds." Long Jiang laughed and said, "Why? Are you still not satisfied? You have to know that you are only 20 years old today. In terms of age, we are all 100 times older than you. The fact that you are able to stand here today has already proven your strength. Don't be anxious. Cultivation has to be done step by step. As for the problem of age that you mentioned, it might appear for other humans. However, for you, I'm afraid there is no restriction. Qiyu was moved and said, Senior Long Jiang, do you mean that under the influence of the origin of nature, my body will be more than 100 years old? Long Jiang smiled faintly and said, In this world, apart from us ancient beasts, plants can also gain wisdom after a long period of cultivation. Different plants have different situations. For example, some plants that are born with wisdom have an easier time being nourished by the spiritual energy of the world. When they reach a certain level of cultivation, they will have a human form. You are now the source of nature, so your situation in this aspect is much better than any other plant. You can think of yourself as a plant, a special plant that has the blood of Kirin flowing through its veins. I'm afraid it will be difficult for you to die. Although I don't know how long your lifespan will be, I'm sure it will be much longer than that of an ordinary Kirin. Qiyu stared at the Longjiang base city in shock. For a moment, he didn't know if he should be happy or worried. No one didn't want to live longer, but at this moment, he suddenly thought of something. If he could live as long as the ancient beasts, then what about his lover and friends? What would they do? If they were all gone after 100 years and he was the only one alive, what would be the point of living? Thinking of this, Qiyu couldn't help but sigh. There was a trace of confusion in his eyes. It's a pity that I'm the only one. Irua smiled and said, This world is balanced. You humans have far more than other races, so you have to pay something. You can't break the balance of the world. Of course, if there are only a few of us, we can still do it. When Kirin is 1,500 years old, we can reach the limit of our abilities. This is also a special characteristic of the King of Beasts. However, we can only live to about 3,000 years old, which is a long time. Some Kirin will die at about 2,000 years old. With your help these days, I feel that my vitality has been rejuvenated after cultivating. You not only healed my injuries, but also extended my lifespan. I think this is the effect of the origin of nature. Since it works on me, it will also work on other people. After hearing Irua's words, Qiyu immediately understood. Yes, as long as I lead my lover and friends to cultivate with me, with the help of the origin of nature, their lifespan will also increase, right? Thinking of this, his previous depression disappeared. He raised his head and looked at the 100 jade stairs in front of him. Seniors, should we go and take a look at the Xianyuan sword? Long Jiang said in a deep voice. We just passed through the Soul Sword Formation, but don't be too happy. The Soul Sword Formation is only the outermost defense of the Xianyuan tomb. As long as we know its restrictions, stronger beasts will be able to pass through it. I and Yimo have been here many times. Although it's easy to pass through the Soul Sword Formation, it's not so easy to pass through the restrictions below. If we want to get the Xianyuan sword, we have to pass through 2 layers of restrictions. I and Yimo have never passed through the second layer. Qiyu was shocked and asked hurriedly, What is the second layer of restrictions? Long Jiang said, It's the stairs in front of us that are only 100 meters tall. Qiyu looked at him confusedly. Irua, who was at the side, said, According to the ancient records, the Xianyuan tomb is where the Xianyuan sword is buried. It is protected by the Soul Sword Formation. If we want to get the Xianyuan sword, we have to go through the Xianyuan stairs after passing through the Soul Sword Formation. Although this staircase doesn't look like much, it's more dangerous than the Soul Sword Formation. If it wasn't for the fact that the stairs can make us retreat, I'm afraid Long Jiang and I would have died many times. Qiyu asked, What kind of restrictions are there on this staircase? How do we pass through it? Irua smiled bitterly and said, It's very simple. If we want to pass through this staircase, we have to defeat one person. It's because of his protection that we can't pass through here. One person? Who is that? Qiyu asked curiously. Iruo and Longjiang looked at each other and said, Emperor Huang. What? Qiyu almost choked on his own saliva. He didn't expect Iruo to say this name. Senior, you aren't joking, right? Emperor Huang. Didn't Emperor Huang die many years ago? Why would he be guarding the Xianyuan tomb? Iruo smiled bitterly and said, Do I look like I'm joking? No one knows how the Xianyuan sword was created. It is the strongest offensive weapon left behind by the gods in our world. In our world, there is only one person who used the Xianyuan sword, and that is Emperor Huang. When Emperor Huang relied on the Xianyuan sword to defeat Qiyu, he led the human race to develop gradually. When his life came to an end, he was buried in the tomb of the Tu clan. However, after he died, the Xianyuan sword disappeared. At the same time, the Xianyuan sword took away his soul. Perhaps this is the fate of every person who uses the Xianyuan sword. Hence, the second barrier is the Xianyuan staircase that Emperor Huang controls. You can only successfully reach the top and see the true existence of the Xianyuan sword if you can overcome Emperor Huang's obstruction on this 100-meter staircase. Qiyu thought for a while and said, Seniors, even if what you said is true, is Emperor Huang really so difficult to defeat? After all, they are just one person. Even if his soul is guarding the Xianyuan sword, with your abilities, are you still unable to defeat him? Iruo said, If you want to think that way, then you are gravely mistaken. Firstly, Emperor Huang and Qiyu were once the strongest human martial artists. Their abilities cannot be imagined by normal humans. Secondly, and most importantly, Emperor Huang was once the wielder of the Xianyuan sword. Do you really think that when he is guarding the Xianyuan sword, he will not use the Xianyuan sword? Under these circumstances, you can only defeat him if your cultivation far surpasses his. Finally, the problem that has been plaguing us all this time is that the Yellow Emperor won't fight us at all. At the same time, we can't ascend this flight of stairs. Qiyu was stunned and said, Why is that? Longjiang's face became a little ugly. Because Emperor Huang requested that only humans are qualified to fight with him. Although we are divine beasts, we cannot. Ah! Qiyu said in surprise. This is one of the reasons why Senior said that the Xianyuan sword can only be used by humans, right? Longjiang nodded and said, We have tried many times, but Emperor Huang only told us that he will not fight with us unless we are humans. We tried to force our way through, but as soon as we tried to use force, the Xianyuan sword would immediately release a strong sword aura and force us to retreat. Previously, Iruo was injured because of this. Therefore, we have to bring you here this time. Among the giant beasts, your abilities may not be outstanding. However, among the humans there are probably not many who can be compared to you. So you're our last chance. If you still can't succeed, we'll give up. Qiyu, take a rest first. After you have recovered your thundercloud force, we will start. We will wait for you below. If you can get through Emperor Huang, you must bring the Xianyuan sword down. Qiyu looked at Longjiang and then at Iruo. He said helplessly, Seniors, aren't you afraid that I will take the Xianyuan sword away after I get it? Iruo said, That is almost certain. However, we still hope that you can get the Xianyuan sword. After hearing what Iruo said, Qiyu couldn't help but frown. He said in a low voice, I see that Senior doesn't trust me. Iruo shook her head and said, No, this has nothing to do with whether we trust you or not. No one knows the true situation of the Xianyuan sword. However, from the fact that it was used by Emperor Huang, it can be seen that such a divine sword definitely recognizes its owner. It is almost impossible for others to use it. Under such circumstances, it is natural that you will get the Xianyuan sword. Qiyu was stunned. He said, But, Seniors, you have worked hard for thousands of years just to get the Xianyuan sword. If I get it then... He didn't want to owe them a favor. If he really got the Xianyuan sword, What would he do if these divine beasts didn't allow him to leave the ancient giant beast era? Iroha smiled and said, "You don't have to worry about this. Whether you can get the Xianyuan sword or not, we are only asking you to do one thing for us. If you can get it, you will have a higher chance. If you can't get it, you still have a chance. I have worked hard for 3,000 years. I just don't want to disappoint my expectations. Even if I can just look at the Xianyuan sword from a close distance, I will be satisfied. Do you know? The Xianyuan sword is the most respected totem of the Earth tribe. Its symbolic meaning to the Earth tribe is greater than its strength. As long as the Xianyuan sword is out, it will definitely be a catalyst for the revival of the Earth tribe. What's more, you have the Xianyuan sword. Before you leave our era, it will be very beneficial to the divine beast. As a Kirin, why wouldn't I want the Xianyuan sword to fall into the hands of the Earth tribe?" Chiyu suddenly understood and said, "I see. However, I can't guarantee that I will be able to get it. After all, it won't be easy to defeat Emperor Huang. What's more, he still has the Xianyuan sword." As he spoke, he had already sat down cross-legged. Longjiang and Iroha stood behind Chiyu. Their eyes were filled with hope. They each stretched out their palms and pressed them on Chiyu's shoulders. They slowly transferred their energy into Chiyu's body to help him recover the thundercloud force that he had used up earlier. Chiyu could clearly feel that Longjiang and Iroha didn't hold back their energy. The thundercloud force in his body recovered to its peak in just a short while. Longjiang and Iroha originally wanted to help Chiyu increase his strength. However, Chiyu's body was too special. When his energy reached its peak, the energy that the two of them transferred to him could no longer be absorbed. "Chiyu, everything depends on you. Take this item as a reward from us." Iroha looked at Chiyu, who stood up. She took out something from her bosom and passed it to him. Chiyu was surprised to see that it was a piece of metal shaped like a leaf. The metal was a faint yellow and didn't shine too brightly. However, as soon as he saw it, Chiyu immediately felt the importance of this piece of metal. It was emitting the energy that only Kirin's octatic treasures would emit. "Senior, this is?" Chiyu asked. Chapter 134. Kirin's Fantasy? This was definitely one of the Kirin's octave. Perhaps it was because all the Kirin's octave hadn't appeared yet, so Iroha only said that it was one of the Kirin's octave. Kirin's Fantasy. What exactly did it do? As Chiyu thought about it, he took the leaf-shaped piece of metal from Iroha. Once it touched his hand, Kirin's Fantasy flashed, and an illusory ball of light enveloped Chiyu's right hand. Chiyu only felt his palm heat up, and Kirin's Fantasy had actually disappeared. What was left on his palm was a fingernail-sized leaf-shaped image. Iroha said, "Perhaps you still don't know how to use Kirin's Fantasy. Among the Kirin's octave, it is the strongest offensive weapon. Do you still remember the Xianyuan sword that we used to scare off the King of Beasts? Actually, it transformed into this weapon. Kirin's Fantasy has already fused with your right hand. From now on, it will be your weapon. As long as you can think of it, it can transform into any form of weapon to attack. Kirin's Fantasy can be considered an energy form, and the metal leaf that you see is just its medium. If you want to truly unleash the power of Kirin's Fantasy, you will need to rely on a large amount of thundercloud force to maintain it. The larger your thundercloud force, the more powerful Kirin's Fantasy will be. At the same time, the condensed weapon will also become bigger. Furthermore, the greatest advantage of Kirin's Fantasy is that it will never be damaged. Its energy form cannot be completely destroyed by any energy. Even if the enemy's attack is too strong and destroys the weapon formed by Kirin's Fantasy, as long as you have enough thundercloud force, you will be able to condense a new weapon to fight against the enemy. A weapon that can transform? This is too amazing. Chiyu's heart was filled with surprise. He did not know that before Kirin's stealth, which could use the art of thousand transformation, Kirin illusion was the #1 treasure in Kirin's octatic treasures. Although its attack power was far from being comparable to the Xianyuan sword, Its characteristics allowed its power to encompass the characteristics of almost all weapons. Moreover, it was a powerful energy weapon. With the powerful energy of Kirin's arm, even if it wasn't invincible, it was close. Senior, this is too precious. After I fight with Emperor Huang, I will return it to you immediately. Although Qiyu was a little reluctant, Yiruo and Long Jiang had saved his, Snow Girl's, and Wenting's lives. Right now, the divine beasts were already completely suppressed by the ferocious beast. If they lost this treasure of Kirin, how were they going to fight against the ferocious beasts? Therefore, he only hesitated for a moment and immediately decided not to accept this treasure. Yiruo smiled and shook her head. You don't have to worry about our Qilin clan. In our Qilin clan, these supreme treasures are not important to us. Only increasing one's own strength is our foundation. After all, these are just external objects. After leaving this place, you still have to look for the Kunlun mirror. I think it will be more useful to you. Take it. I believe that in your hands, the Qilin illusion will not be humiliated. Yiruo shook her head and said, No, the Qilin illusion is more important to you than me. My energy has long reached the peak of Qilin. 3,000 years has already brought me to the edge of death. If not for your origin of nature, I'm afraid that I won't be able to live for more than 10 years. You have given me a new life, and I'm willing to use the Qilin illusion to exchange for it. But, Senior. Qiyu's eyes were a little moist. Although Yiruo looked very young, her mentality was already old. Over the years, the divine beasts had gradually been suppressed by the ferocious beast. That kind of pressure had filled her with despair towards this world. Qiyu's appearance had brought her new hope amidst her despair. In fact, he had brought hope to almost all the divine beasts. She took out Kirin illusion and gave it to Qiyu. Not only did it show her appreciation towards Qiyu, but it was also a form of repayment for what she had asked Qiyu to do. After all, that matter was really too dangerous. However, it was really too important to the divine beast. Looking at the young Qiyu, Yiruo felt like she was looking at her own child. As they were both members of the Kirin clan, what could he do even if Kirin illusion was given to him? Furthermore, Yiruo had a deeper thought. Although Kirin illusion had been given to Qiyu, it did not mean that Qiyu would no longer be of help to the divine beasts after he left this era. If he wanted to leave this era, he would have to obtain the Kunlun mirrors. If he wanted to leave this era, he would have to obtain the Kunlun mirrors. With the Kunlun mirrors, as long as he knew the path, not only would he be able to return to the era that belonged to Qiyu, he could also return to this era at any time. Expressing goodwill to him now was the best choice to attract him. As a member of the Kirin clan, Yiruo understood Kirin's characteristics better than anyone else. Kirin's emotions would never change. With a smile, Yiruo said, "All right, child. I think I can call you that. You don't need to feel any psychological burden. If you are unable to obtain the Kunlun mirrors and leave this place, then you will be one of us divine beasts. If you are able to return to your own era, then I only hope that you can come back often. After all, only in our era can you see your own Kirin clansmen. In terms of age, I am much older than you. If you are willing, you can call me Auntie." Qiyu's heart trembled slightly. From Yiruo's gentle gaze, he saw what he had been looking forward to for 20 years. That was motherly love. Although his lovers also showed him a lot of concern, motherly love was completely different. As an orphan, Qiyu's heart trembled involuntarily when he felt Yiruo's heartfelt care for him. "Auntie, thank you. Don't worry. Even if I leave this era in the future, I will definitely come back often to visit you. No, I don't want to call you Auntie. Do you know? Since young, I have been an orphan. No one has ever cared about me or loved me. If it is possible, can I call you Mommy? Even if it is just once, it will be good." Qiyu's eyes turned red. At this moment, he had already forgotten that he was in Xuanyuan's tomb. His heart was completely immersed in familial love. In the pursuit of love. If it was said that Irua still had some rational considerations before she decided to give Kirin's illusion to Chiyu, then now, the rationality in her heart had completely disappeared. With her experience from 3,000 years of life, she seemed to see the misery of his childhood in Chiyu's eyes. She saw the loneliness in his heart because he did not have the nourishment of familial love. She also saw Chiyu's desire for familial love. Irua's eyes also turned red. Of course, she knew how painful it was for a child to not have a mother. She stretched out her hand and grabbed Chiyu's shoulder. Her bright eyes looked at Chiyu's red eyes and said with a trembling voice, "Of course you can. If I can have a son like you, I will be so proud." He could no longer control his tears. Chiyu knelt on the ground with a thud. His voice was trembling, and his lips were trembling. After a full minute, he finally called out the words that he had not said for 20 years. "Mom! Mom!" Irua hugged Chiyu's head in her arms, and her tears flowed down as well. Chiyu nestled in her arms. His heart was agitated like never before. He never expected that after coming to the ancient beast era, he would actually acknowledge a mother. A strong sense of familial love flowed in Chiyu's heart. He did not know how long he had been waiting for this day. When he was young, he had yearned for a mother so much. Now, he finally had one. Although she was not his biological mother, she also had the blood of Kirin. That feeling of familiarity was enough to make up for everything. Longjiang looked at Irua and Chiyu in a daze. He sighed softly and walked forward slowly. He put his arm around Irua's shoulder and said, "Congratulations, Irua. You have a good son." Irua looked at Longjiang, and her big teary eyes were filled with happiness. Although she and Chiyu felt very close before, they were not from the same era. There was always a barrier between them, and Kirin's illusion became the weapon that broke this barrier. Through Kirin's illusion, Chiyu felt Irua's sincere care for him. It was also through Kirin's illusion that Irua saw the loneliness in Chiyu's heart. Sometimes opportunities only existed for a moment. But now it was happening to them. Irua nodded at Longjiang. More tears flowed down from her eyes. She naturally would not let Chiyu recognize Longjiang as his father. After all, the Kirin clan was the noblest clan among the divine beasts. Other than Kirin himself, it was impossible for him to recognize anyone else as his father. It had been a long time since Chiyu had cried. When his tears wet Irua's chest, his heart felt incomparably carefree. His tears were tears of grievance, tears of sorrow for his past, but at the same time, tears of happiness. "Child, stand up." Irua helped Chiyu to stand up. Looking at her son, who was half a head taller than her, Irua could not stop her tears. "Silly child, you must have suffered a lot when you were young." Chiyu wiped his tears and said, "In my era there was a song. In the lyrics, a child without a mother is like a blade of grass. Not only do I not have a mother, I don't even have any relatives. I'm not even comparable to a blade of grass. If it wasn't for the country that raised me, I'm afraid I would have already become a wisp of resentful spirit." Ira held Chiyu's big hand tightly and said, "Now, you are no longer a child without a mother, right? I have not been so happy in a long time. Chiyu, my son, Mother believes that you will become my pride in the future. You will become the pride of our Kirin clan." Chiyu raised his head and looked at the white jade staircase in front of him. His confidence surged like never before. "Mother, don't worry. I will definitely get the Xianyuan sword. Take it as my gift to you." Taking a deep breath and looking at the leaf pattern on his right palm, Chiyu took big strides and walked towards the staircase in front of him. Irua's figure flashed and suddenly stood in front of Chiyu. She said, "Child, you must remember that when you are fighting, you must not have any emotional changes. Only by remaining calm can you make better judgments and unleash your full strength. Do you understand?" Chiyu nodded and looked deeply at the mother he had just acknowledged. "Mother, don't worry. I know what I'm doing." "That's right. Being calm is indeed the key to victory. When a person has something in his heart, the emotions in his heart will play an even more important role. I must win this battle. I am fighting for you. You have already given me the strongest strength in the world, and that is motherly love. After finishing his last sentence, Chiyu took a step forward and hugged Iruo. Then, he walked towards the staircase without hesitation. Iruo looked at Chiyu's back view. Her eyes were filled with a misty light. Suddenly, Longjiang's voice rang in her ears. Iruo, do you know what I saw? Iruo looked at him doubtfully. Longjiang smiled and said, I saw absolute confidence. You are fighting for mother. Iruo's eyes were filled with pain. Longjiang, I don't want Chiyu to do that anymore. Longjiang was stunned and said, Have you really made up your mind? Iruo's eyes were filled with hesitation. She threw herself into Longjiang's embrace and cried, I don't know what to do. Although I have a child, I feel too much sorrow from him. I don't want my son to suffer any more harm. Even if there's only a sliver of possibility, I don't want it to happen. Longjiang sighed and said, However, this is the only hope for us divine beasts to rise again. How about this? Let's not make any decisions. Let Chiyu make his own decision, okay? After his battle with Emperor Huang, regardless of whether he wins or loses, we will tell him and let him make his own decision. Iruo raised her head and looked at Longjiang. The look in her eyes became even more complicated. At this moment, they felt the change in the energy in Xuanyuan's tomb. They raised their heads and looked at the staircase in front of them at the same time. At this moment, Chiyu had already climbed up the staircase. He had taken 10 steps up. A golden light lit up in the middle of the staircase. A majestic voice sounded, Who dares to barge into the territory of the Xianyuan sword? As the golden light grew brighter and brighter, a silhouette appeared out of nowhere within the golden light. Under the bright light, the silhouette looked extremely tall. He was actually around 3 meters tall, and his entire body was covered in golden armor. His long black hair flowed down his back, and his handsome face exuded a chilling aura. His pitch-black eyes seemed to be able to see through everything in the world. Intense light constantly radiated from his body, and the invisible aura he exuded seemed to cause the surrounding air to become viscous. Huang Emperor. Was this person Huang Emperor? Chiyu raised his head and looked at that imposing figure. A descendant of the Yan and Huang Emperors. He was one of the greatest ancestors of humankind. As he looked at Huang Emperor, Chiyu suddenly had a strange feeling. It was just like the first time he had seen Iruo. Facing this greatest ancestor of humankind, he naturally showed respect from the bottom of his heart. Greetings, Your Majesty Huang Emperor. Chiyu bowed. Huang Emperor first looked at Iruo and the Longjiang couple below. When his gaze shifted to Chiyu, it had already become much gentler. He nodded and said, Did they bring you here? Chiyu nodded and said, That's right. Your Majesty Huang Emperor, you are the ancestor of humankind. However, do you know that the beasts are already on the verge of destroying the divine beasts? If this becomes a reality, the next ones to be destroyed would probably be humankind. By that time, the only humans left would probably be the evil descendants of Chiyu. I think this is not what you want to see. Huang Emperor looked at Chiyu calmly and said, Your goal is the Xianyuan sword. Chiyu was stunned. He did not expect Huang Emperor to be so direct. However, this was his goal as well. He looked at Huang Emperor without giving in. He nodded and said, That's right. It is for the Xianyuan sword. Huang Emperor nodded. His acting ability suddenly turned golden. 2 rays of golden light almost instantly pierced into Chi-Yu's eyes. Chi-Yu's body shook violently. His body started to tremble uncontrollably. At that moment, his spiritual energy was completely frozen. It was as if his body was sealed. He completely lost control. Iruo was very anxious as she watched from below. Just as she was about to rush up to save Chiyu, Longjiang stopped her. Don't be anxious. In the past, we have also brought people from the Earth race here. However, there were no changes like this. It seemed that Chi-Yu was indeed different. We have barged in many times. Huang Emperor did not hurt us. He will definitely not hurt Chi-Yu, who is also a human. Wait. Under Longjiang's consolation, Irua's emotions calmed down. She focused all her attention on Chi-Yu. At this moment, Chi-Yu's body trembled even more violently. The golden light instantly disappeared. The energy aura instantly calmed down. Chi-Yu's body shook. He felt that his mind was blank. He shook his head forcefully and slowly came back to his senses. He suddenly realized that the golden light from Huang Emperor's eyes seemed to see through everything about him. Even his memories seemed to be copied. That kind of naked feeling made him very uncomfortable. Huang Emperor looked at Chi-Yu in surprise. He said in surprise, "You actually do not belong to this world? You are a human who has inherited Kirin's bloodline. That is a little strange. Unfortunately, you are not the inheritor of the Xianyuan sword." Chi-Yu stabilized his emotions. He looked up at Huang Emperor and said, "In this world, there is no absolute number 5. Wasn't it fate that Huang Emperor obtained the recognition of the Xianyuan sword? Since I am able to stand here today, it proves that I have some fate with the Xianyuan sword." Huang Emperor's eyes flashed coldly. He said indifferently, "That is because you think too highly of yourself. How can anyone obtain the Xianyuan sword? However, since you are a human, I can give you a chance. As long as you can defeat me, you will pass the second stage. You can go up and receive the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword. However, before that, I have to warn you. If you want to pass through my protection with your current strength, it is almost impossible. Leave. Don't waste your energy for something that doesn't belong to you." Chi-Yu didn't have the slightest intention of retreating. He walked up the stairs step by step. "I said, in this world, there is nothing that is impossible. Since Huang Emperor has given me this chance, if I don't try, how can I be satisfied? You are the ancestor of the human race. Naturally, you are also my ancestor. You are the person I worship the most. As your descendant, I know that I am far from you. I don't know if His Majesty Huang Emperor can make an exception." "Make an exception?" Huang Emperor looked at Chi-Yu in surprise. "You are not the first human to come here. However, you are indeed the first to ask me to make an exception. What reason do you have to think that I will make an exception?" Chi-Yu laughed mischievously. "Because I am your descendant. Don't tell me that you do not wish for your descendant to obtain the Xianyuan sword?" Huang Emperor frowned. "Although you possess Kirin's bloodline and there are no flaws in your nature, the Xianyuan sword is not something that just anyone can obtain. For you, possessing the Xianyuan sword may not be a good thing. It is impossible for me to make an exception. As long as you can pass through my obstruction and reach the top of the stairs, it will be considered that you have passed this stage." Chi-Yu's eyes lit up. "This is what you said. You cannot go back on your word." Huang Emperor said proudly, "I have never done anything that I regret in my life. Even when I swore to obtain the Xianyuan sword, to become the sword spirit of the Xianyuan sword after death, I have never regretted it." The smile on Chi-Yu's face became even wider. "Of course I believe in you. As my ancestor, you are very noble. Then, I am coming. Your Majesty Huang Emperor, please be careful." At this point, Chi-Yu's advancing footsteps suddenly stopped. Facing this ancient emperor, how could he dare to be the slightest bit careless? Divine light flashed in his eyes. Kirin's shadow had already appeared behind him. A huge black and silver light continuously surged into the shadow. Kirin's aura suddenly surged. In almost an instant, Chi-Yu had raised himself to the second stage of Kirin transformation. The thick black scales, the huge black wings, and the constantly shining Kirin pearl on his chest all represented the powerful strength of Kirin. He closed his left hand in front of his chest. The black and silver light condensed in the form of silk threads. With a flash of brilliance, the 1-meter-wide Kirin mirror appeared out of thin air. This was not the end. The surging Kirin true fire burned under Chi Yu's feet. The originally thick black Kirin armor was immediately covered with a layer of fiery red armor. The surging flames burned his body like a fire god descending to the mortal world. Under the effects of Kirin Red and the second stage of Kirin transformation, Chi Yu instantly raised his body's defense to the limit. The strong light flickered continuously. His body also became taller after Kirin transformation. He raised his head, and his silver hair fluttered behind him. Silver light bloomed in his eyes as he stared at Huang Emperor. Huang Emperor still stood in the same place, allowing Chi Yu to condense his power. There was not a trace of emotion in his calm eyes. After the light of Kirin Red burned, Huang Emperor smiled indifferently. He raised his right hand to the side. A golden light shot from the stairs to the platform. With a flash of light, a Xianyuan sword soul had already fallen into Huang Emperor's hand. Huang Emperor tilted his head and looked at the sword soul in his hand with some fascination. He looked at the sword soul in his hand obsessively. This sword soul was exactly the same as the sword soul form in the sword soul formation, but it was shining with a dazzling golden light. Turning his head, Huang Emperor's gaze fell on Chi Yu again. This Xianyuan sword has 50% of the real Xianyuan sword's power. Although it is only 50%, it is still indestructible. You have to be careful. When I attack, I will not show mercy. The Kirin pearl in front of Chi Yu's chest shone with a dazzling light. The thundercloud force in his body was instantly raised to the limit. On the armor formed by Kirin Red, Kirin True Fire was suddenly emitted. The fire that could burn souls was released within a radius of 3 meters around Chi Yu. With a stretch of his right hand, a huge sword that was the same shape as the Xianyuan sword appeared in Chi Yu's hand. It was also a huge sword in the form of energy. However, under the enhancement of Kirin True Fire, it shone with a fiery red radiance. At this moment, Chi Yu suddenly understood another effect of Kirin Red. It could enhance any weapon that he used with Kirin True Fire. The same flame appeared on Kirin Mirror. In an instant, the Kirin Pearl, Kirin Mirror, Kirin Red, and Kirin Illusion of Kirin's octatic treasures became powerful weapons for Chi Yu to enhance his strength at the same time. When Ting and Snow Girl stood up on the platform in the distance and stared at the stairs in the distance, their eyesight was very good, so they could clearly see Chi Yu's body shimmering with flames and Huang Emperor's golden armor. One red and one gold. It was very obvious in Xuanyuan's tomb. Even the sword souls in the sword soul formation seemed to be watching them, waiting for this peerless battle. Ah! Chi Yu shouted and stepped on the stairs in front of him with his left foot. His body leaped up high, and because his speed was too fast, there was a fiery red shadow behind him. A huge amount of energy was constantly released from his body. In his right hand, the huge sword that was formed by Kirin Illusion suddenly glowed with a 10-meter-long Kirin True Fire. It slashed downwards without any fancy moves and went straight for Huang Emperor's shoulder. At this moment, Chi Yu was like a real god of fire. This slash seemed to have condensed all of his fire thundercloud force. The explosive compressed thundercloud force instantly burst forth, and the surrounding fire energy seemed to riot. Huang Emperor still stood there, watching Chi Yu's mighty slash. There was some admiration in his eyes. The huge golden sword in his hand seemed to rise slowly, but it met Chi Yu's attack the moment Kirin Illusion slashed down. Ding! There was no huge explosion caused by the collision of energy as expected. Only a clear boom was heard. Huang Emperor still stood there, and there was not even a trace of energy emitted from his body. However, the huge sword in Chi Yu's hand that was formed by Kirin Illusion had shattered into pieces, and his tall body was sent flying hundreds of meters into the air. Fortunately, this place was no longer within the range of the sword soul formation. Otherwise, he would have been turned into a sieve by the sword souls. Only Qi Yu deeply felt the power of the Xianyuan sword. He had used all his strength in this slash. The main reason why he chose to attack head-on was to test the extent of Huang Emperor's power. However, after the real fight, Qi Yu realized that he could not sense Huang Emperor's power at all. When Kirin illusion slashed down and his attack collided with the Xianyuan sword in Huang Emperor's hand, an irresistible sharp qi immediately shredded Kirin, which was once ranked first in the Kirin octave, into pieces. That sharp qi slammed into Qi Yu's body like a wall, and he was sent flying high into the air. Qi Yu knew very well that Huang Emperor had already shown mercy. If the sharp qi from the previous slash had not been directed at him, then his body would have been cut in half. Even with the protection of the Kirin mirror, Kirin red, and his own Kirin armor, Qi Yu did not believe that his defense could withstand the slash of the Xianyuan sword, even if it was only the Xianyuan sword with 50% of its energy. However, Qi Yu, who was sent flying into the air, was not discouraged at all. Instead, there was a faint smile on his face. Huang Emperor said calmly, "The Kirin bloodline is indeed worthy of its name. To be able to enhance a human's ability to this extent, I'm afraid that only those with the Kirin bloodline can do this. Your strength is not weak, but it is far from enough to pass my test. Energy should not be used like this. Only by condensing energy together can it exert its greatest power. Take what you did. Although it looks gorgeous enough, it has not exerted the characteristics of your own energy compression. How can you be my opponent? Moreover, do you think that a frontal attack can be compared to my Xianyuan sword? In this world, apart from the Pangu axe, in terms of attack power, there is no other weapon that can be compared to the Xianyuan sword. Facing the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword head-on, no matter what you use, no matter what other weapon you use, you will only be defeated. I think there is no need to continue this test." Qi Yu smiled slightly and said, "Your Majesty Huang Emperor, I have a question to ask you." Huang Emperor said, "Ask away." Qi Yu said, "In this Xianyuan tomb, you have lived for many years, guarding the Xianyuan sword. Don't you feel lonely?" Huang Emperor was stunned, and the expression on his face changed slightly. He said, "Lonely? Perhaps, but so what if I am lonely? Since I have chosen to guard the Xianyuan sword, I will definitely continue until the day the new master of the Xianyuan sword appears." Qi Yu smiled slightly and said, "Indeed, I admit that with my own strength, I cannot pose a threat to you at all, and it is unlikely that I can pass your test. However, I have a suggestion, and I don't know if it is possible." Huang Emperor seemed to be very lenient towards Qi Yu. He nodded and said, "Speak." Chapter 135. Huang Emperor said, "Of course not. Although humans are born weak, their potential is infinite. If it wasn't for the limitation of lifespan, I'm afraid that no other race in this world could compare to humans. The wisdom and creativity of humans are enough to make themselves stronger. Although my descendants are constantly working hard, they are also affected by their lifespan. If they don't have magical opportunities, they are indeed not strong enough to compete with the giant beast. This is also what I've been worried about. If humans only rely on wisdom, I'm afraid that it will take a long time before they can surpass the giant beast." Qi Yu nodded and said, "I come from the future. Everything you've said is the development of history, but it's not absolute. Perhaps my strength alone can't help humanity become stronger, but I have the blood of Kirin, so I'm confident that I can compete with any ancient giant beasts in the future. You've read my memory, so you should know that I now have the ability of the source of nature. My lifespan is no longer limited, and I was born to protect humanity. Although I'm not the new master of the Xianyuan sword, I'm still very satisfied to be able to come here. Your Majesty Huang Emperor, I sincerely beg you to let me stay and continue to fight with you and listen to your teachings." Huang Emperor looked at Qi Yu in surprise and said, "You want to stay?" Qi Yu nodded and said, "Yes, I don't have any extravagant expectations of obtaining the Xianyuan sword, but I want to stay and listen to your teachings. I want to improve my strength through fighting with you, so that I can have a greater chance of protecting humanity in the future. You are the ancestor of humanity, our greatest hero. Do you want your ability to be lost? I believe that only through constant fighting can I better improve myself, and only through constant fighting can I better grow. So I hope to stay and relieve your loneliness. If one day I can really become your opponent and pass your test, then I will try again to see if I can become the master of the Xianyuan sword. The Yellow Emperor's eyes regained their calmness. He looked at Yi Futian in the sky, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. I am the true sword spirit that guards the Xianyuan sword. I only have one task, and that is to protect the Xianyuan sword from being harassed by outsiders. As for the second test that I guard, only humans can take it. As the sword spirit, I can't teach you anything, but if you wish to continue fighting, I have no right to stop you. Looking at the trace of admiration in Huang Emperor's eyes, Qi Yu knew that he had made the right bet. He was overjoyed. What could be better than having an opponent who would not kill him and was much stronger than him? Only by fighting with the strong could he better improve his strength under pressure. Qi Yu had already deeply experienced this in countless battles in the past. At the same time, it was impossible for him to not covet the Xianyuan sword. The Xianyuan sword was an ancient divine sword in human history, and it was also the first divine sword. If he could have it, even in the era of ancient beasts, he would be able to do whatever he wanted. Very well, Your Majesty Huang Emperor, I think I won't be discouraged until I reach the top of this ladder. However, there is one thing I have to say first. In the battle with you, I will use all kinds of methods to try to reach the top. Don't blame me for being despicable. Qi Yu planned for a rainy day and found an escape route for himself. Huang Emperor smiled faintly and said, "What is the greatest strength of humans? Do you know?" Qi Yu thought for a moment and said, "Is it creativity?" Huang Emperor shook his head and said, "Creativity is derived. Even if you have inherited the bloodline of Kirin, the energy that this bloodline brings to you is far less than the greatest strength of humans, and this greatest strength is wisdom. What is despicable? In a real battle, only victory is the ultimate goal. If you can rely on your wisdom to pass me, I will only feel gratified. Boy, come on, let me see how despicable you are." Qi Yu laughed and said, "Great ancestor, Your Majesty Huang Emperor, then you must be careful. 1,000 tricks and 100 changes of the Xuanji realm technique." With his left hand in front of his chest, Qi Yu, who was in the air, finally used his fifth Kirin's octatic treasures, which was Kirin's invisibility. Even in Xuanyuan's tomb, the space around the creation's network was still greatly affected by the appearance of Kirin's invisibility. A dark red light instantly enveloped the surrounding space, including the stairs, and everything in the surroundings suddenly darkened. The 1,000 tricks and 100 changes of the Xuanji realm technique enveloped Qi Yu, Huang Emperor, and the stairs. At the moment when the 1,000 tricks and 100 changes of the Xuanji realm technique appeared, Qi Yu had already moved. He did not expect his domain to be able to trap Huang Emperor. After all, in front of the ancient divine sword Xianyuan, any domain could be easily broken. What he was doing now was to use the teleportation ability of the 1,000 tricks and 100 changes of the Xuanji realm technique. In the blink of an eye, everything around him was plunged into darkness, and Qi Yu's body also disappeared at this moment. The next moment, he was about to appear on the round platform where the Xianyuan sword was kept. Just when Qi Yu was overjoyed and thought that he was about to succeed, Huang Emperor's voice suddenly sounded in his ear. "Have you forgotten? I've read all your memories. Although I can't use this domain, I've already learned all the changes in this domain from your memories." Qi Yu's body, which was in the midst of teleportation, stopped. An irresistible force came over him, and he could only feel his body floating away. It was only then that the meridians in his body recovered. However, in the next moment, he could clearly feel that sharp aura again. There was a flash of golden light, which seemed to be splitting heaven and earth apart, and the surrounding darkness was cut apart. The 1,000 tricks and 100 changes of the Xuanji realm technique disappeared. Huang Emperor was still standing there, still holding the Xianyuan sword in his hand. He nodded at Qi Yu, who was floating in the air, and said, "This domain created by Kirin is the most mysterious one I've ever seen. If I hadn't known about its power beforehand, perhaps you would have succeeded." Qi Yu said somewhat discontentedly, "Your Majesty, this test doesn't seem fair. You already know all my abilities, you've read my memories, and you're even very clear about my fighting style. If that's the case, how am I supposed to fight?" Huang Emperor smiled slightly and said, "I've said before, as long as you're willing to stay here, you can continue to challenge me. You're right, I'm alone here, and I don't mind defeating you again and again. As for reading your memories, I'll only do it once. If you have the ability to create a domain that's as mysterious as this one, then I don't mind losing to you." Qi Yu looked at the Emperor and shook his head helplessly. "It looks like our battle will have to continue. Mother, Senior Long Jiang, you can leave now. Whether or not I succeed here, I'll return to the headquarters of the Tu clan to find you." Irua and Long Jiang had been listening to the conversation between Qi Yu and Huang Emperor. They never would have thought that Qi Yu would actually start bargaining with Huang Emperor. In the end, he even wanted Huang Emperor to become his sparring partner. What surprised them the most was that even though Huang Emperor didn't say it explicitly, he still agreed. This situation was completely out of their expectations. Long Jiang gave Irua a look and said, "All right, we'll go back first. It's your honor to be able to receive guidance from His Majesty Huang Emperor. We'll bring your wife and leave together. We'll wait for your news in the clan. Your Majesty Huang Emperor, we'll take our leave." Huang Emperor just nodded his head and didn't say anything. However, his gaze was kind. From the bottom of his heart, Huang Emperor didn't have a good impression of the ancient beast. This was also the reason why he decided to let Qi Yu stay after Qi Yu said so much. Even though Qi Yu had the blood of Kirin, he was still a human. Naturally, the Emperor was very happy to see a strong descendant of his. If it wasn't for Irua and Long Jiang protecting the Tu clan, they would have been destroyed by Huang Emperor long ago. Qi Yu shouted at Wen Ting, "Ting, Genesis Network, follow the two seniors back to the Tu clan and wait for me. I'll go back to find you after I'm done here." Under the effect of his own energy, his voice spread far and wide, allowing Wen Ting and Snow Girl to hear it clearly. When they came, Irua, Long Jiang, and Qi Yu were all intercepted by the Sword Souls. However, when they left, the Sword Souls didn't have any reaction. With their cultivation, they quickly returned to the front of the Golden Door. Wen Ting didn't want to leave at first. She wanted to stay and accompany Qi Yu. However, Irua told her that she was afraid that her presence would affect Qi Yu's mentality. Moreover, Huang Emperor definitely wouldn't hurt Qi Yu. Therefore, she brought the two girls away. After all, Xuanyuan's tomb still existed. It wasn't difficult for them to come here to see Qi Yu. In the Golden Halo, Wen Ting and Snow Girl left reluctantly. In the entire Xuanyuan's tomb, only Qi Yu and Huang Emperor were left. Huang Emperor said indifferently, "You can continue. Although intelligence is important, if the difference in strength is too big, you still won't be able to pass me. I can tell you one thing. In fact, in terms of energy, I'm actually not as good as you. However, in terms of actual combat experience, you're too far behind. If you want to defeat me, you have to use your own energy well. Only when your actual combat experience reaches a certain level can you pass my test." Qi Yu smiled bitterly. "But the Xianyuan sword still has 50% of its power, isn't it?" Huang Emperor said, "Don't expect me to make an exception for you. If you can't even pass my test, then it's impossible for you to pass the Xianyuan sword's test. I won't go easy on you." Qi Yu suddenly said, "Going easy on me? Ah yes, I want to pee. What should I do?" Huang Emperor was stunned. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Just when he was about to say something, Chi-Yu suddenly moved. The same giant sword appeared in Kirin's hand. He stepped on Kirin, and his body flickered in the air. Lin Bing Do Zhe Jiezhen. Chi-Yu quickly spat out the 9 syllables mantra. Every time he spat out a word, his body would change position. At the same time, Kirin's illusion would make a slash. After the 6 words ended, 6 slashes were made. The angle of each slash was extremely tricky. The slashes were aimed at places that were least likely to be attacked. At the same time, Chi-Yu's 6 slashes had different attribute. He exerted the power of his 4 auspicious clouds to the limit. At the same time, 2 of the slashes contained the power of Kirin's origin. With Huang Emperor's guidance, the light and aura of the 6 slashes seemed to be much weaker than before. However, the energy contained in the 6 slashes was extremely condensed, and each sword shadow carried a surging energy. When the 6 slashes were made almost at the same time, the Kirin's mirror in Chi-Yu's left hand disappeared. A 2-meter-long longbow appeared out of thin air in his left hand. His right hand pulled the bowstring, and the bow was like a full moon. A giant arrow shining with purple, blue, red, and green light appeared out of thin air on the illusory energy bow. Wasn't Kirin's illusion able to transform into any weapon at will? Naturally, the bow and arrow could be used as well. Chi-Yu's thundercloud force continued to condense and compress into the giant sword through Kirin's arm. The light on the body of the arrow began to distort, and its aura was completely locked onto Huang Emperor's body. The 6 sword energies approached Huang Emperor's body at the same time. His body finally moved. Chi-Yu only saw his golden-armored body take a few quick steps on the spot, and the 2-meter-long Xianyuan sword in his hand was as dexterous as an embroidery needle. Pick, cut, hook, and hack. The simple sword movements were completed in an instant by the golden silhouette of Chi-Yu. Under the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword, the 6 sword shadows released by Chi-Yu exploded with a huge amount of energy. Ding, 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 ding. 6 soft sounds were heard, and the attack that was enhanced by the 9 syllables mantra was instantly destroyed. Not only did the Xianyuan sword dissolve all the attacks, but it also shattered the energy brought by the 6 swords before they exploded. However, at that moment, Huang Emperor's expression was somewhat solemn. He could clearly feel the pressure that Chi-Yu brought to him, and this pressure came from the giant arrow on the energy bowstring. Although he easily resisted the 6 sword attacks from Chi-Yu because of the movement of his body, he was instantly locked on by Chi-Yu. Just as his body moved to dissolve the attack in front of him, Chi-Yu's hand had already loosened. The trajectory of the arrow could not be predicted. When the bowstring had just hummed, the arrow had already reached Huang Emperor. At that moment, Huang Emperor had just finished his last move, and he had just dissolved all 6 of Chi-Yu's swords. Chi-Yu's timing was just right, and it was the moment when Huang Emperor was at his weakest. As soon as the bowstring sounded, Huang Emperor's gaze froze. Just when Chi-Yu thought that he had successfully hit Huang Emperor, the Xianyuan sword unexpectedly moved in front of Huang Emperor, blocking the energy arrow of the 4 attribute. Rays of light burst forth from a single point, and a huge amount of energy instantly erupted from that point. First, a faint layer of light spread out in all directions, followed by a ring of light that spread out in all directions. That huge amount of energy did not make a single sound, but Chi-Yu's body was thrown high up into the air. In the face of danger, his reaction was extremely fast, and he instantly placed the Qilin mirror horizontally in front of him. At the same time, he curled up his body behind the Qilin mirror, and borrowed the rebounding force to shoot into the air. He did not dare to move back. Although it was the easiest way to dissolve the aftershock of the shock, the soul sword array was right behind him. Chi-Yu did not want to become the target of public criticism. The entire Xianyuan tomb shook, and the huge energy trembled. All the Xianyuan sword souls temporarily stopped swimming. Wind, fire, thunder, and water. The four energy elements gradually dimmed in the surging explosion. Not only did Qi Yu's arrow condense all his energy, but it also condensed his full understanding of his own abilities over the past few days. It seemed like an arrow that was just a combination of energy, but it contained countless ingenious designs. In that arrow, the four attributes were arranged according to the order of mutual generation. When the explosion occurred, wind was used to support fire. Fire was used to support thunder. With water as the medium, the four attributes were superimposed to produce the strongest power. At the same time, because the energy explosion occurred at the tip of the arrow, the condensed energy reached the strongest effect. The explosive force produced by the pressure was almost 5 times that of Qi Yu's own strength. This was also the strongest attack he could unleash so far. Even Qi Yu himself did not know how high he had flown with the help of this rebound force. Waves of weakness kept coming from his body. Not only was his own energy weak, but his spiritual power was also weak. It must be known that he had condensed the energy of that arrow, arranged the energy of the arrow, and condensed the energy of the arrow into a point at the end, which consumed a lot of spiritual power. Without the guidance of spiritual power, how could he create such an effect? When there were no more energy fluctuations, Qi Yu put away his Kirin mirror, opened the wings on his back, and looked down. He was surprised to find that the originally wide platform was now just a golden spot in his eyes. He could not see the appearance of the Xianyuan sword clearly, because the place where the Xianyuan sword was located was completely covered by a layer of golden light. At this moment, Qi Yu did not really hope that he could defeat Huang Emperor. He knew very well how strong the attack power of the condensed point of the arrow was. From the moment they met, he was full of respect for Huang Emperor. In the fight with Huang Emperor showed mercy. If that arrow had really hurt Huang Emperor, Qi Yu did not dare to think about it. He quickly put away the wings on his back, and quickly descended. When the golden spot of light below continued to enlarge in his eyes, Qi Yu completely focused his spiritual power on his eyes, carefully searching for traces of Huang Emperor. However, the original staircase had become empty. Everything seemed to have disappeared along with his arrow just now. He floated down and landed at the place where he was previously. Qi Yu was very anxious and shouted loudly, "Your Majesty Huang Emperor, where are you? I did not mean to hurt you. It was you who taught me to condense as much energy as possible into one point. Your Majesty Huang Emperor, where are you? Can't be, you will definitely be fine." Qi Yu put away his Kirin transformation and strode up the stairs. If Huang Emperor was still there, he would definitely be on the platform. At this moment, he actually felt a little panic in his heart. He was afraid that he would really destroy Huang Emperor. That was the ancestor of mankind, and also his great ancestor. Just when Qi Yu was about 10 meters away from the top of the stairs, suddenly, without warning, a resistance appeared in front of him. Qi Yu felt his body hit an insurmountable barrier. With a bang, because he was rushing too quickly, his body was immediately bounced off and fell down. With a loud bang, he fell heavily on the platform below. If it was an ordinary person, such a heavy fall would probably have long been smashed into a meat patty. After all, from the platform below to the top was at least 100 meters high. However, with Qi Yu's modified body, even if he did not use thundercloud force, it was impossible for him to fall to his death. A sharp pain came from all the bones in his body, but he still flipped over and jumped up from the ground. The Yellow Emperor's dignified voice rang out from above. "Before you confirm that your opponent has completely lost the ability to resist, you can't relax at all. You've been too careless." The golden figure reappeared and slowly walked down from above. Seeing Huang Emperor, Qi Yu could not help but be overjoyed. He shouted loudly, "Your Majesty, are you all right? That's great, this is really great." There was no way to express the excitement in his heart through his expression. Because of the height of tens of meters, Qi Yu did not look carefully. At this moment, a trace of gentle light flashed in the Emperor's eyes. Kid, do you think that kind of attack can defeat me? You overestimate yourself. I've said it before, with your current strength, you still have a long way to go if you want to pass me. Huang Emperor's voice was still so dignified, even a little strict. However, for some reason, listening to Huang Emperor's lecture, Qi Yu felt very comfortable in his heart. He did not have a father since he was young, but he read many novels. Even he did not know that in his subconscious, he had already treated this human ancestor in front of him as a strict father. Although it was only a faint subconscious feeling, that kind of closeness was naturally emitted from Qi Yu's body. I knew that you would definitely be fine. Qi Yu floated forward and met up with Huang Emperor in the middle of the stairs. Huang Emperor had already passed the Xianyuan sword to his left hand. With his right hand behind his back, he looked calmly at Qi Yu and said, "You don't have to worry about me. Not to mention that your strength is far from enough. Even if you were strong enough, you would not be able to destroy me. As the guardian sword spirit of the Xianyuan sword and the guardian of Xuanyuan's tomb, unless the Xianyuan sword is destroyed. Otherwise, I will exist in this space forever. How about it, do you still want to fight?" Qi Yu smiled bitterly and said, "Forget it for now. The attack just now was launched after a lot of calculations and brainstorming by myself and function. I gathered all of my strength. The thundercloud force in my body is too weak now, it cannot pose any threat to you at all." Huang Emperor snorted and said, "Idiot, no matter when you attack, unless there is no other threat and under the premise that you can kill your opponent, you absolutely cannot use your full strength." Qi Yu stared blankly and said, "Why is that?" Huang Emperor said, "It's very simple. When you attack with your full strength, you can certainly increase your attack power to the limit, but you must also understand that in a situation where you attack with your full strength, it is simply impossible to change your move. Once the enemy withstands your attack, or if there are other enemies present, what you do is no different from suicide. The best attack is to only use 70% of your strength, leaving 30% for changes. While bringing pressure to the opponent with each strike, one also had to seek for changes. Absolute power was important, but technique was equally important. While possessing power, technique could not only reduce one's energy consumption, but could also better display the best effect of one's attack. For example, the 6 swords that you attacked me just now were strong, but the power was after all scattered. The energy of the 6 swords was extremely uneven. When you attacked, although the angle was tricky, it lacked the aura of a king and the confidence to win. Under such circumstances, although you can stop me for a while, it is impossible for you to force me to not be able to block your last arrow. At the same time, because your attack was divided into 2 waves, it caused your energy to be scattered. If you can concentrate all your energy on that arrow, the power that can be produced will definitely rise to another level." Qi Yu frowned and said, "But if I do that, what if you take the initiative to attack me? No enemy can watch me concentrate all my energy to launch my strongest attack." Huang Emperor said indifferently, "You can't, but that does not mean that others can't. Watch." As he said that, his left hand raised the Xianyuan sword high up, his eyes shining brightly, staring fixedly at Qi Yu. In that instant, Qi Yu suddenly realized that the person standing in front of him was no longer Huang Emperor, but a towering mountain. The huge spiritual pressure actually caused endless fear to rise in his heart. In that instant, the only thing he wanted to do was to escape and defend, almost subconsciously retreating quickly. Although the light on the Xianyuan sword did not change, Qi Yu could faintly feel a huge amount of energy condensing in the sword at lightning speed. The pressure disappeared, and Qi Yu panted heavily. Huang Emperor stood where he was and looked at him indifferently, saying, "Do you understand?" Qi Yu's eyes showed a trace of confusion, but after a short moment of thinking, his eyes suddenly lit up. I understand. It's spiritual power." Huang Emperor revealed a rare smile, saying, "That's right, it's spiritual power." Human attacks are divided into three types. Attacks that rely on one's own body and weapons are the lowest level of attacks, physical attack. The higher level is attacks that rely on one's own condensed energy to launch attack. And the word energy is very new but also very vivid. I found it from your memories. Energy attacks are obviously much stronger than physical attack. You can also think of me as a special form of energy. It's just that I'm not ordinary energy. The third type of attack is the attack of spiritual power. Mind power itself was also a form of energy. It is superior in that it is invisible, and also the highest level of attack. As the saying goes, subduing the enemy without a fight. When we fight each other, it is reflected on the spiritual level. When two people fight, the first thing that collides is actually the spiritual power between them. If your spiritual power can suppress your opponent and make them not dare to act rashly, you will naturally have more time to react. You have absorbed the energy of the reincarnation fruit, so your spiritual power is many times stronger than ordinary people. As long as you pay attention to the use and training of your spiritual power, it will definitely be of great benefit to your future battles. Do you understand? Chi Yu listened to every word Huang Emperor said seriously. It was hard to find such a good teacher. He was a smart person, and he would not let go of this kind of opportunity. He nodded and said respectfully, "I have learned." As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately floated back to the platform below, sat cross-legged, and entered a state of cultivation. What he needed to do was not only to recover his thundercloud force, but also to meditate and understand the battle theory that Huang Emperor had taught him. This was the most valuable experience. Looking at Chi Yu sitting cross-legged below, Huang Emperor couldn't help but reveal a faint smile. He said to himself, "You are indeed a smart person. I hope you can understand more." At this moment, it was impossible for Chi Yu to see that Huang Emperor's right hand was moving rapidly behind his back. The energy light on it was much weaker than when he first saw Huang Emperor. How could the arrow, which was enhanced by the energy of the four elements, be so easy to resist? Chi Yu's meditation lasted for a long time. From this moment on, he had entered a real state of cultivation. In Xuanyuan's tomb, there was no distinction between day and night. What Chi Yu did was to constantly repeat the process of cultivation. Every time his thundercloud force recovered to its peak state, and at the same time, when he comprehended some of Huang Emperor's instructions, he would challenge Huang Emperor again. The newly acquired Kirin's fantasy was also used by him more and more skillfully in the process of continuous battles. Various kinds of battle tactics were integrated with the experience that Chi Yu and Huang Emperor had taught him, as well as his various wonderful ideas. At this moment, Chi Yu had already forgotten everything in the outside world, and put all his thoughts on how to defeat Huang Emperor. At the headquarters of the two tribes, standing by the Green River, Wen Ting and Snow Girl stood side by side. The two girls had changed into their own clothes, and their long hair hung down their backs. This place was designated as a forbidden area by Yi Ruo, and no one from the two tribes would disturb them.